All right, everybody, welcome to the Angry Sun Zone. If you've been following us for the past couple episodes, we are now in the top 5 of our top 15 all-time favorite games. Just a reminder, these are our favorite games. They're not the best games. They're not the most well-crafted or influential games. They're our personal favorites, whatever that means to us. And we went through the last 10 in the past 2 episodes, so check those out if you haven't already. And then we'll get into it. I'm Alex.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Santo.
And get ready for the top 5 favorite games on this podcast.
All right. I'll start. Now, if you've been listening to the past few episodes, you may have noticed that a lot of the games that I've put on here are pretty slow-paced strategy games for the most part, a lot of JRPGs and the such. That all changes now, because my number 5 is Battlefield Bad Company 2.
Oh, hell yeah!
Yeah, so, like a lot of people, I had a shooter phase. You know, I had an Xbox 360. That's what you played on Xbox 360, was shooters.
Or PC. I'm more of a PC shooter myself.
Yeah. But Battlefield Bad Company 2 is, like, apart from Smash, the most fun I've ever had in a multiplayer environment. I absolutely love this game, and it does so many things right, where other Battlefield games, I think, stumble a little bit.
Yeah, I think, for me, Bad Company 2 had... It was one of the most fast-paced Battlefield games.
Yeah, and I think that worked to its favor a ton, because the main mode in Battlefield is the Conquest mode. Or Conquest? Whatever.
Yeah,
I think it's called Conquest.
Something like that.
Yep.
I think they changed.
Conquest.
They might change the name in different games, but the concept is just that there's control points, you hold the points, and that affects respawn rates, and there's a ticket system.
Yeah,
and the tickets are both points and respawns.
Yeah, if you respawn on the map, you use up one of your team's tickets, and the team that controls the most control points slowly depletes the enemy's tickets. And also the control points act as your spawn points. That and the whatever squad you're in.
Yeah, so both map control and good KD ratios are important for winning on in the team versus team setup of Conquest mode.
Mm-hmm.
Synopsis: your team's collective life is tickets to the gun show. Don't run out of tickets, guys.
And so it's a great concept for players like me who might not be the best shooter players. Like, I can get a pretty good amount of kills, but I'll also get a ton of deaths because I run around a lot. So, but I'm also, like, I have really good perception when it comes to map control. So this mode is perfect for a player like me to do well in. And if you're doing well, chances are you're having fun. And one of the big concepts in the Battlefield games, apart from this, is the vehicles. It's always been a vehicle-based shooter. So you got, tanks, jeeps, little, like, ATVs, the fucking helicopters.
Yeah, the helicopters, yeah. Some of the later games have jets.
Mm-hmm. Bad Company 2 has jets in one level.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, in the really long desert level with the half a shipping container thing in the middle of it.
Oh, for some reason I was... You know what? I thought that was a Bad Company... I thought that was a Battlefield 3 map.
Anyway. Yeah, and the thing about a lot of Battlefield games is that some of the maps focus on the vehicles a bit too much, where you pretty much have to use the vehicles to do anything.
Yeah,
the control points are just too far apart to work on foot.
Yeah, I feel like some of the more recent Battlefield games really fall into that trap, especially Battlefield 3.
Battlefield 3, 100%. Like, I switched over to playing Team Deathmatch exclusively.
Yeah, Battlefield 3 was just... It was... the vehicles were not only necessary, but also kind of overpowered to the point where being on foot wasn't a valuable option if you were even remotely in the open.
Yeah, and I think the different classes had a
Whereas
some of the I think
Bad Company 2 on the other hand had a great balance between where being in a vehicle was totally a viable strategy, and in fact, like usually necessary to have at least some vehicles involved. But it wasn't like make or break. Like everyone has to be in a vehicle or they're dead.
Yeah, like a lot of the maps had a fair amount of buildings or a fair amount of like rocks and shit.
Yeah, although
that you can hide behind. But
speaking of buildings,
exactly.
The thing I really loved about Bad Company 2 was the destruction and the fact that you can completely level a building
down to like the floors, the like some beams on the sides and the stairs. Everything else could be destroyed.
Yeah, and especially when a game went long, it really felt like the battle was dragging on as the map itself is slowly destroyed.
Yeah, like holding one of the center control points at the start of the game is completely different than trying to hold it at the end of the game. So the matches felt incredibly dynamic in that way. And the last thing about the maps that were great is that they were also a decent amount smaller. I think that is chalked up to the fact that Bad Company was meant to be a console Battlefield game more than a PC one. So there was a lower player count.
Yeah. I think having the more tightly constrained maps actually helped a lot, though.
Mm-hmm. It did.
Yeah,
and I also liked the expansion pack for it, Bad Company 2 Vietnam. That was it was quite a lot of fun. The different dynamic of it compared to the first one, where there'd be a lot of hiding in the bushes and some really funny kills where
I don't think I ever played that.
Yeah,
it was pretty good. It extended the formula a bit more. It was, I would say, a bit more infantry based on most of the maps than vehicle. It was skewed more towards being on foot, which makes sense because in the context of the Vietnam War, it's a lot more like slogging through marsh.
Yeah.
Now, did you guys also play the single player campaign?
So I played a little bit of it, but as soon as I played, I loved the first Bad Company's campaign. I thought it had a really fun tone in a way that a lot of shooters were way too self-serious back then. But with Bad Company 2, I played a few levels of the campaign and then started playing the multiplayer, and as soon as I did that, I couldn't stop.
I played the campaign, but the campaign in Bad Company 2 was not what made that game great.
I agree.
It was a fairly average shooter campaign, I felt. Oh, and then there's the other thing we haven't talked about yet, which was the rush mode, which I thought was an incredible mode. I think they still have kept it around in some of the later Battlefield installments.
I haven't played the last 3 Battlefield games.
Well, I know Battlefield 3 technically had a rush mode, but it was terrible because the maps did not work for rush at all. The maps in Bad Company 2 were... a lot of them were actually designed for rush specifically. So, for those who aren't aware, rush mode, as opposed to the standard conquest mode, I believe it still had tickets. But
it did.
The difference mainly was that the control points were initially held by one team, sort of the defending team, and the other team had started with maybe 1 point just to spawn at.
Yeah. And
their goal is to, the attacking team's goal is to take both however many points. Usually there's 2 or 3. And their goal is to take over all the points on the map. The defender's goal is to just defend them. And the defenders win by basically just holding out until the attackers run out of tickets, and then the attackers win by taking all the points on the map. And it was a very, very fun mode, I thought. Especially because the maps themselves were designed to kind of facilitate it in such a way where it was actually, a lot of them were surprisingly balanced, where both the attackers and defenders had a good chance of winning, even with the asymmetry. And
you couldn't sneak back to the very back point of the defenders, you had to take the points sequentially.
Yeah.
So that also had the knock-on effect of making like the individual encounters feel bigger because there were more people at like one point on the map, whereas in the conquest mode is like a number of tiny little skirmishes happening all over the map for map control and just like people running into other people in buildings.
Yeah. Rush,
So, different feel, but
Rush
still
definitely made the whole thing feel a lot more dynamic, a bit chaotic at times, because the whole team is just kind of bearing down on this one point. But then still, people are trying to do things like kind of get
Sneak
behind
around,
and do a pincer strike or
It really lived up to its name.
bring especially funny because if the point is being rushed by a bunch of people, just completely raining down grenades and tank fire onto the point is a viable strategy, especially for the attackers, since the defenders tend to cluster around it. But then also even the defenders can try to blow it up.
Yeah, the defenders like oftentimes had like fortifications, like mounted guns and shit. Like I remember the snow level, where there were these guns that were like so difficult to snipe people off of like head on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would always make it a point to try and sneak around.
Oh, man.
Like
I
that's
remember-
what I would do every single match.
Oh yeah, the snow level. That was one of my favorites. And I
Yes.
remember there was this one time, this one round where I was in a tank, and I had a partner in the tank. I'm trying to remember. Maybe one partner drove, and the other partner in the tank used the main gun. I can't remember. I think that might have been how it was set up.
Yeah.
And I think I was in the gun, he was driving, but we just completely dominated by. We were on attack, and I think I went 27-1 or something stupid in that match, because we just had such a good, we just had such a good vantage point on this hill to like rain down, just slowly destroy all of the control point buildings and just slowly creep up. Very sort of attrition warfare kind of thing.
Yeah.
But very fun.
Awesome.
Truly the game of a decade ago.
Yep, a game that it's the only game on this list that I can't go back and play.
That's the really unfortunate thing about online multiplayer, is that it really depends on having the community there.
Like it's so where some games are like a point in time for completely different reasons. Where this game is a point in time because, I mean, Battlefield's an EA game. I have zero confidence that the servers are still up for that.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people have moved on to the further entries
and
in the series.
Yeah, and with shooters especially, or pretty much any competitive multiplayer game, the people that are still playing a competitive multiplayer game online 10 years later, you don't want to play against those people.
Yeah. No.
I've tried playing fighting games even 2 years after they were released online, and it's not a time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really just... and I think maybe the most recent Battlefield game or two I haven't played, but they really don't look quite... Bad Company 2 had, I think, just the perfect mix between, on-foot gunplay and vehicle play.
And the classes were super balanced.
And the classes were really dynamic, really balanced. They had great progression trees. And it just everything in the more recent ones doesn't look quite as good. Yeah, honorable mention goes to Battlefield 2142 though. Yeah, that was also
Funny
a really
you
good
mentioned
one.
that.
All right, well, let's. It sounds like we might have to move on to the next game.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll go next. So my number five game is Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis, and I loved the Sega Genesis Sonic games. I decided to go. It was a really tough toss-up to pick Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Obviously, and then there's Knuckles, which, for those of you who don't know, so the Sega Genesis was a cartridge-based system, and there was another game, Sonic and Knuckles, and it was this really silly thing where you could actually plug Sonic and Knuckles in, and then plug another Sonic game in to Sonic and Knuckles. So now you've got like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and so you could just play Knuckles in this other game. I think you might even been able to do it with Sonic 2 to get Sonic 2 and Knuckles. Anyway, between those, all the various Sonic the Hedgehog games on the Genesis, Sonic 2 was my favorite, mostly just for a few of my favorite zones. Zones like Chemical Plant Zone. I love the music in the Sonic games. It's got this really great beats. There's also Casino Night Zone in Sonic 2, which is infamous for having a sort of convoluted casino puzzle. It's not even really a puzzle. It's just the level is very busy, and it's easy to get confused and turned around. And but it's really good. And other zones like Metropolis Zone, Oil Ocean, Mystic Cave, like super cool, super fun. All the Sega Genesis Sonic games are great. I almost picked Sonic 3 solely for Hydrocity Zone because that music in Hydrocity Zone is total banger. But I love the Genesis Sonic games because they've got this really nice feel of a platformer that can be extremely fast, but you really have to know the game. Yeah. I mean, in theory, I think you can, like a lot of other classic platformers, if you are really well versed in the levels, you can power through the game in, I don't know, like an hour or something.
Yeah.
Especially Sonic games, because you can rip through a level in like 30 seconds or a minute if you really know the level. But it takes a lot of practice to kind of get to that point. And before that, you're really just sort of, it's a bit slower. You're taking it slow and learning the level, learning the paths. A lot of Sonic levels have this sort of, there's like a fast path, a puzzle path, and kind of a normal path. And you have to know the way through the level. Which gives you this great sense of progression even as you're replaying the levels, because as you get better and better than them, better and better at them, you get faster and faster running through it, which is just such a great feeling, especially in a really solid platformer. So I love the Genesis Sonic games. They're really one of the games that I have such fond memories of. So.
Yeah. Even had a username based off of them for a while.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I still do on some services.
Yeah, I never really got into the Sonic games, but I'm going to put that down to I only knew one person who had a Genesis as a kid, and it wasn't me. So whenever I went over to their house and we played Sonic, I had to play as Tails. And playing 2-player in that game is not a good experience, especially when you haven't played much Sonic. Whereas they just like ran ahead of the level crazy fast, and I'm just like lagging behind. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Oh yeah,
yeah. The 2-player is cool, but definitely a bit strange if you're playing with someone who really knows the game, and then it just sort of like forces. Yeah, you just get left behind.
You just get forced off the fucking screen.
It requires not only for both of you to know the game at the same level, but also to have a sense of teamwork that you're both doing things together and not pushing ahead.
Yeah, but 6-year-olds don't have that.
No. Yeah, for me, I played a lot of Genesis games. I used to go over to my cousin's place and play games like Toe Jam and Earl, or this helicopter game that I can remember but can't seem to remember the name of. But the Sonic series definitely had a special place in our hearts. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I remember we kept on pushing further and further to beat it. I think it was a good year before we were able to do it in in one session sitting down together, which usually resulted in it going from daylight to nighttime by the time that we were finished. So yeah, Sonic's great, and he gets a special cameo in the games we do play, like Smash Bros.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I love platformers. I've played so many platformers. And this is actually the first platformer on my list so far. But it's really one of the ones that got me to fall in love with the genre of platforming video games.
Nice.
All right. My number 5 goes back to Santa's preferences there. My number 5 is Battlefield 2142. And this game definitely is way, way up there now. I think it actually was the game that came out just before Bad Company 2, if I remember correctly.
It was definitely before.
Yeah.
It might have even been before Bad Company 1.
Yeah.
Because it was a PC game.
So the conceit of 2142 is that it had a pretty large player count. I think it might have been 64
Yeah,
players.
32 aside.
And it had vast epic maps to match its giant player count. And similar to the other game, the main mode of this was Conquest mode. Now, there was another cool conceit to it was the Titans. And I love Titan mode so much that that's the thing that made this Battlefield game rise to the very top of my Battlefield list and be an S-tier shooter game. And that is because in Titan mode, essentially you have a giant floating fortress, one per side, and you can choose to revive or start each new life in this giant floating fortress, which has a lot of different ways to get you around the map quickly. So you can hop into one of their drop pods, like an escape pod Star Wars style, and it'll shoot you out of the bottom, and you can steer it towards the ground. Now, as the game first came out, there was this hilarious bug where if you whipped your mouse one way or the other, the pod would start rotating, and like some sort of some sort of tornado of doom, you would all of a sudden be able to control yourself as you're flying through the map in an invulnerable pod of death. And
you are the missile.
If you got good enough, you could actually land directly on poor enemies, and they would just...
I am become missile, destroyer of enemy.
It was quite entertaining. And so with the vehicles were also cool because besides this giant floating fortress, you could actually fly, transport, and attack helicopters off of them, but these were jet helicopters. And on the ground, you also had mechs and hover tanks and slow-moving ground fortresses, fast-moving vehicles and hover Humvees. One of my most favorite things to do, though, was to fly around in the hoverjet, and I had sunk probably hundreds of hours into learning how to not instantly die after hopping in one of these because the controls were very sensitive.
Classic Battlefield. The best air vehicle has tremendously difficult controls.
I got to be known as Helicopter Dick, which was a funny nickname because my strategy was to drop down in the middle of an enemy squad with my helicopter, hovering approximately a foot above the ground, and then jerk my mouse off to the right or left so that I would swing my helicopter blade, the tail rotor of my helicopter around in a 360-degree circle, and if there was any enemies within touching distance of that helicopter blade, they would just all instantly die. It was pretty funny. Definitely an unconventional way of playing with the helicopter, and definitely subject to a lot of verbal abuse from my opponents who are like, "What the F are you doing, you asshole?"
Yeah. And of course, lots of crashes straight into the ground as he's learning to try and pull off this trick.
My poor hapless teammates who were hopping in the helicopter with me while I was figuring that out. The other thing that I liked was they had a really strong rock paper scissors dynamic. It felt like with if you're piloting a vehicle, you'd really have to watch out for either aircraft or enemy infantry who have invested their experience points into the anti-tank weaponry.
So specifically, the engineer class in 2142 had a couple of basically specialized, not just in repair, but also anti-tank and anti-vehicle. And there were there were several different weapons that specialized against different types. Like I think there was like a tracking missile, which was really good against aircraft.
Yep.
And then there's also a railgun.
Yep.
And the railgun demolished everything. Really hard to hit aircraft with it, but really good against stationary targets like tanks.
Oh yeah. And one of my also
so in
favorites,
general, I felt like 2142, similar to what I liked about Battlefield, Bad Company 2, it had a good balance between the infantry play and the vehicle play, which I definitely feel is sometimes lacking in some of the other Battlefield installments. But it did so on much larger maps in a much more sort of big, epic scale.
And they also just had a lot of cool technology. Like they had mines that anti-vehicle mines that would hop up off the ground and fly after vehicles that passed too close to them. Those are pretty funny. They actually had a personnel stealth generator, so you'd have to holster your weapon to bring this thing out. And it would make you invisible, but it would make this hilarious high-pitched screeching noise. And if there was some newer players who thought that they were being effective in hiding behind you, I would usually just turn around and see this funny, fuzzy-shaped object and just knife them to death while they're helpless. And then the other cool thing that I found was the airburst grenades on the assault class. Because you could target a wall that an enemy was hiding behind. Maybe it's about a chest-high wall and they're crouched behind it. And then you could aim your rifle at it, increase the distance of the airburst by like a meter, and then fire it over the wall. And it would usually just explode above their heads to hilarious effect. There's a lot of weapons that changed the dynamic of normal combat.
There's a lot of cool stuff they made to be, future combat styled, and they never really brought it back. A lot of those ideas in later games.
The other thing that they had that I think eventually went away over time is the concept of the commander. So if you're playing this game and for some reason first-person shooters are not as fun to you as real-time strategy, you could switch into the commander seat. And this unique class while you're playing would be able to park yourself in the middle of combat, completely vulnerable to anyone who happens to come across you, and you'd be able to utilize abilities. Now, these abilities are actually, they're pretty powerful, but they're also tied to physical objects on a lot of the maps. And so if you have a particularly annoying commander who's using his abilities a bit too effective, you can either find him and blow a hole through his head, or you can attack the equipment that he's using to harass you and take them out. And there's anything from orbital strikes to EMP blasts to UAV drops to dropping supplies for your friends or on an enemy's head if they're standing still for far too long and camping. Mm-hmm. So definitely a wide...
You think you're going to snipe in that bush? Fucking supply drop. I'm going to give you all the ammo you could ever need.
Dying to a box that fell out of the sky.
Ammo for the rest of your life.
for the 5 seconds of the rest of your life.
Yeah. The other thing, we didn't quite elaborate on this, but so just going back to the Titan mode, which was a unique mode in 2142 that, as far as I know, there's never been another mode like it, really, in Battlefield.
Battlefield 1, there was a mode where you could summon a Zeppelin, which had I think it might have had a little bit similar things where you could like spawn in the Zeppelin and use its guns and shit.
Okay, yeah.
But not quite the same as you go onto it and board it and start fucking it up.
Yeah, so the thing about Titan mode is that it's kind of like Conquest mode in that there's control points on the map. But the difference being that instead of being tickets, what the control points do is that so initially you cannot board the enemy's Titan. So what you do is you control the ground-based control points, which are actually missile silos, and those blast out the shield of the enemy Titan. And once you have destroyed the shield on the enemy Titan, then you can board the enemy Titan and destroy it from the inside, which is how you win. And so the cool thing about Titan mode is that it's actually sort of a two-stage mode in a sense. Of the first thing that happens is that the teams are competing to control the control points that fire missiles to the enemy Titan, and then after they've taken down the shield, it's this infantry-only skirmish in the enemy Titan, where actually the attacking team has to ferry their soldiers up there using aerial transport. And very cool dynamic from that mode.
And you actually, so it had a very Star Wars-esque ending in that you had to breach these shielded corridors, take down the shields in the corridor, and then proceed to the central generator room and blow the crap up out of this generator. Now, even better is as soon as the generator was destroyed, you had only a few seconds to then evacuate this ship and successfully jump off of it before it explodes in catastrophic Star Wars fashion, and then you'd get a special achievement for that. So definitely could end a lot of the games with a pretty cinematic bang, and it felt pretty great to be part of the boarding party or even landing the killing blow.
Mm-hmm. I have two knocks against 2142. One personal and one very strange design decision that they made. The personal one is that it unfortunately came out during a period of time where my internet was way too spotty to be playing to be playing online games, really. I still tried, but it would just constantly cut out, and whenever there was ever a commander airstrike, I just couldn't play the game for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, 2142 was kind of, for its time, it was actually really ambitious. The huge maps, the huge player count, so many different modes. Like, it was really... at the time, it was the most ambitious Battlefield, I'd say, that had been made.
Yeah, well, Battlefield 2, had all that stuff, but what 2142 added was just, those fucking airstrikes that were just, completely just, stopped a server from running almost.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I legitimately just couldn't play the game when those were happening. And,
that's rough.
And I also, had trouble playing the Titan mode, too, because it's, if your internet cuts out and fucks up a little bit when you're just on the ground in a building, that's not a big problem. But when you're trying to fly a transport with two other people in it up to the enemy Titan and your internet cuts out.
Yeah, well, I also remember that actually the Titan mode was fairly graphically intensive too, because there's so much draw distance involved in the maps.
Yeah.
Because you're in the air so much on the Titan mode, and the maps are legitimately massive. And it really pushed my hardware. When I first bought 2142, I couldn't play it. I had to upgrade my computer.
I played it on the lowest setting, or what I call potato mode. And one of the most comical things was that the stealth mechanics in there, they didn't render your character model invisible. They had some sort of special effect that they used, and in potato mode, you could quite easily see someone who was using this. And you could also see people hiding in bushes or behind things. It was really funny, and people would be going, "How'd you see me?" And I'd be playing the potatoes.
I remember hearing stories about the first Team Fortress, to where certain video cards would render the water properly, so you couldn't really see into it that much. But older video cards wouldn't, so that you could see through it. Or maybe it was the other way around.
Oh yeah, so these super competitive players are getting shitty graphics cards just to
it's
break the game.
To see through the water and be able to pick people up. Yeah. But the second thing that I thought was really weird about 2142 is that I didn't like the progression as much, because it felt like so many of the options that you needed were locked behind the progression. Whereas other Battlefield games, it felt like when you started out, you had a bit easier time.
Yeah, honestly, that was actually, I would agree with that complaint. Especially for some of the classes.
Oh, yeah.
Like the engineer in particular, many of the actually good anti-vehicle weapons are relatively high up the unlock list, to the point where a low-level engineer in 2142 was basically a handicap because they were just a poor quality scout. or something.
To comment on that mechanic, there's actually something interesting that I noticed that Battlefield tried to do, but I don't think was very successful. Now, when you kill a player, they drop their kit. And so technically, a low-level engineer can access higher-level engineering gear if they kill another engineer and steal his stuff. But it never felt quite right to me because... it was always of intense combat.
It was always really hard to actually use that effectively. It was sort of like... It was a nice bonus for a low-level player every once in a while, kind of at random, that you really can't rely on.
Yeah.
And I think the key to that is because, it
was good for getting, like, refilling your ammo and shit.
Yeah, it was good for that.
I think part of it is just the sense of personalization that,
Yes, 100%.
When you've chosen the specific weapons, you're familiar with them, and popping into, it's not as if they're just upgrading your kit with new stuff. It's that you were forced to use their pistol, their rifle, all their equipment, and all of a sudden you're thrust into what feels like the roulette machine. And hope it's useful.
About the only time I ever really felt good about getting someone else's kit was when I was playing engineer, and before I had unlocked the railgun, I was always happy when I got a kit that had the railgun in it.
Yeah.
Just because the railgun was my favorite anti-tank weapon in that game.
It was also my favorite anti-face weapon.
When you hit people with it, that was very satisfying.
Yeah.
But
ragdoll them into the ground.
The one progression tree that made absolutely zero sense was the assault one. Now, because every tree had two branching paths. Now, the assault one had a gun that was like really powerful close range, but its damage potential fell off pretty quickly.
The boss.
Yeah. And the other tree had this more like, I don't know, the DMR and Halo or something like that, where it was like...
The Bauer.
Yeah, the more mid-range, long-range gun that in like almost every situation, because these were fairly large maps, was better. Except... The one other weird thing about the assault was one of the starting guns was way better than the other one. Like
the Krylov. Oh my god!
Whichever faction you were on determined what your base level kit was before you got any unlocks, and for whatever reason, the guns had different stats.
Yep.
And so one of the factions had a gun that was it had so little recoil on it that it was actually really easy to take people out at long range with it. So it's just when I was playing, it's all right, what faction am I at? I'm in that one. Okay, I'll use the starting gun rather than this gun I've spent a bunch of time getting. On the other faction, shit, I gotta use this gun. It was so weird.
Krylov was amazing. Good times.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess we'll move on. My next one's really quick. Because my number 4 was Advanced Wars Dual Strike, which we had a nice Advanced Wars discussion on the last episode. But one thing that I want to just briefly mention was, a week or two ago, me and Alex, I don't know if Sean, you also got this, got a Humble Bundle that had a game called Wargroove in it.
Oh, yeah.
And, which is essentially a spiritual successor to Advanced Wars. Now, I haven't started playing it yet.
Neither have I.
Okay.
It looks... I'm excited to try it soon.
Yeah, so maybe we'll be able to talk about that next episode or in some future episode. For sure,
future content. Make sure you subscribe so you can hear all about Wargroove.
Yeah, look forward to that. So we can move on now to Alex.
Okay, cool. So my number 4. So this is a classic game. If you haven't played this game, I very strongly recommend that you play this game, especially because you can get this game for free. I am talking about Cave Story.
Hell yes.
Okay, so
oh yeah,
Cave Story, for those of you not initiated, is an incredible side-scrolling platform shooter. And one of the interesting things about Cave Story is that it I'm not going to say it's the first indie game ever, but it's it basically started the indie craze.
I'd call it the first modern indie game because a lot of like the earliest of early games were independent games made by one person. Then then industry got bigger. The important games, notable games, were now made by studios, whereas Cave Story was
Cave Story was
made by one dude
for,
over the course of like 5 years.
Yeah, Cave Story was one of the first massively popular games that was an entirely one-man project.
Yeah, released in 2004.
Yeah, so Cave Story has incredibly tight controls. It's got great mechanics. It has a story. Like it's a. I don't want to say it's entirely linear, but it's mostly linear. It's like it's kind of Metroidvania-ish, but not quite as exploratory.
It's more like there's. Yeah, the path's fairly linear, but you can go off the beaten path for like a few secrets and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, and there's quite a few secrets in the game actually, and the game is really, really good. Pretty much everything about the game is actually really on point. The controls are great. I think the graphics are really great. It is a retro-ish style, but it does have very smooth animation. I would actually recommend, by the way, if you haven't played it, probably pick up Cave Story Plus, which has a few different options if you're interested in buying it.
I think like an updated graphics set if you prefer that.
Yeah, it has some updated graphics if you prefer.
You can always choose the original.
A little bit more high fidelity. I love the original personally. Mm-hmm. It's got a great, pretty straightforward but engaging story. For those of you who fancy a challenge, there is a secret ending to the game, which I'm not going to spoil, other than to say that
it's so freaking difficult.
It's so difficult.
I've never beaten it.
I have gotten to the secret final boss. I have gotten, I believe, to the final form of the secret final boss, but I have not beaten the secret hell.
Same.
It's incredibly difficult. Even getting to the final boss is basically an accomplishment. I remember there was a forum we used to frequent, and some madman actually beat the game without getting any health upgrades, and he beat the secret final boss without any health upgrades.
Without any health upgrades, and without a lot of the weapon upgrades you could get.
Yeah, he pretty much
beat it with the default gun.
Stuck to the default gun.
Like halfway through the game, you can choose to get
there's several different.
A third of the game you can choose to swap it for one gun, and then later on you can choose to swap for a different gun if you want.
Yeah, there's several. There's maybe like a half dozen different guns and weapons.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the weapons were really cool. A lot of them were very different, and
pretty much every weapon had a unique feel.
Yeah, and it had a cool mechanic where defeating enemies gave you experience that you could collect for your weapons to level them up, and then when you got hit, you lost experience for those weapons. And they had 3 different levels for each weapon that increased the power and stuff. So it was,
except for one weapon, the Nemesis.
Oh yeah,
which is extraordinarily amusing because it's backwards. At level 1, it's one of the most powerful weapons in the game. At level 2, it's
okay.
It's okay. It's not good, but it's okay. And at level 3, it's completely useless and fires rubber ducks that I don't even. If they do any damage at all, they do the absolute minimum.
Yeah. So funny.
Very, very funny weapon, that one.
And
I think that's actually a secret unlock weapon as well.
You need to...
I don't think...
Is that one you have to give up the blade for or something? There are certain weapons you have to choose which one you want.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not... you can end up missing them if you don't... Mm-hmm. If you're not thorough.
Yeah. Some really fun bosses and some absolutely incredible music in this game as well.
Oh yeah, the music. We didn't even talk about the music yet, but the music is just
some of the finest early retro chiptune stuff you could hear.
Yeah. Really, really good music.
Yeah.
So memorable. I still have Grasstown stuck in my head.
Yeah, earlier we were taking a walk and Alex had his ocarina out, and I was actually humming Grasstown in my head.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, and the well,
Yeah.
that's just the cave story.
That's not
theme.
Grasstown. That's
Yeah.
the Cave Story theme, which is also the main theme. Super good.
And even if you're not necessarily like interested in playing this game, you should check out the Cave Story Remix project, which was released pretty soon after the game was.
Yeah.
Which remixed the track. There's some really good remixes on there,
Some really, really good
especially
ones.
the remix of the Final Boss theme, "Never Die." Whew.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was
Excellent.
Excellent remix of an excellent song to begin with. So Cave Story. And what I will say, some games, like when you replay them, especially older games, I'm going to be honest. Some of the games that I love, I go back to them and I'm kind of like, oh, this is not as good as I remember. But Cave Story, I've played Cave Story. I've played it probably a dozen times. It's so good, and it's one of those games that you can just replay over and over. Especially the other reason I played it so many times was that there are in fact some mods to the game.
Oh, really?
There's one in particular where you play as a different character, Curly. Got named Curly Story. Curly is a sort of character in the game that you meet maybe a third of the way through, and there's a mod where you play as Curly instead. So,
Yep.
really, really great game. It kickstarted the indie craze, I would say, and is legitimately one of the greatest action platformers of all time.
Completely agreed with that. What a game.
All right. So for my number 4 on my S tier list, I have, oh man, you guys are going to love this, EVE Online.
Oh my.
I didn't know.
Spreadsheet Simulator. Love it.
Spreadsheet Simulator, the game.
No. It's a criminal enterprise simulator.
It's the we need friends in Russia because time zones simulator.
So, EVE Online is this space-based game that...
It's a space MMO.
It's a space MMO, and it came out in 2003.
Yeah.
And it still has a huge following. And the game has only gotten bigger since then. But essentially, you start as, your lowly pilot, piloting a very small ship. And as you progress, your access to new ships and new technologies for your ships ever increases until you can potentially man titanic ships that make other ones seem like little dwarfs compared to you.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna just add a little clarification there. The only way to pilot the biggest ships in the game is to literally be a leading member of a large clan, which are called corporations in this game. Because the cool thing about EVE Online is that basically everything in the game is player driven. Mm-hmm. Every part you buy for your ship was quote unquote made by another player. The ship parts that were made by other players were made from asteroid rocks that were mined by other players. And all of this actually is accomplished through basically an artificial economy. Which in fact trades.
I would argue it's a real economy.
Yeah, I would say which in fact trades against real currency at a exchange rate, and you're right. It is basically a real virtual economy, and everything you do in the game is basically with real players. If you get in combat, most of the combat is against other players.
There's some single player content, like ships and shit like that.
Not much.
So back when
At least when I played, there was very little PVE. Almost everything in the game is PvP in a sense. I don't know. Maybe I also joined the clan fairly early, so
That'll do it.
so we were like out in the Outer Rim where
yes, the Outer Rim.
It's pretty much nothing but piracy.
So the closer that you are to major centers with a lot of player activity, they actually had the in-game police, which were NPC ships, however. And should you break the peacekeeping laws in lawful space, these space police will come and absolutely destroy you. Mm-hmm. Now, other players could sometimes abuse these laws in order to make sure that you die, even in friendly space. So you have to be careful of that. But then, as you travel further and further away from friendly, known player space, the higher chance that you're going to run into piracy, up until the point where you're out in the middle of nowhere. Now, out in the middle of nowhere, there's lots of natural resources, there's some great PvE missions, and then there's just deadly pockets of player bases. And lastly, one of the most interesting things was they introduced the concept of wormholes. These wormholes would lead to space that is cut off from the rest of the traversable galaxy, except for by these wormholes, which would pop into existence for a short time and then disappear. And then once you're in wormhole space, there would be wormholes leading to other pockets of wormhole space, through which you could get lost in there for quite some time before finally finding somewhere back to normal space. So if you went in there to go do some digging, it could be quite an adventure. Now, for my build, I had tried the clan thing. I didn't like being a peon in a giant corporation. It felt a little bit too much like hopping out of my day job to do another day job. So what I did is I researched a few things. I researched stealth technology, so I could, rather than being the biggest, beefiest guy around, I could just flat out avoid a lot of fights. And then I learned scanning technology. Mm-hmm. Now, scanning technology was interesting because you actually had to learn fucking geometry in order to be really effective at scanning.
Yeah, so just like, if you think that what we are describing sounds cool, keep in mind everything in this game takes absolutely incredibly large amounts of time and actual work to make to get anything useful done, like learning geometry or setting up an Excel spreadsheet to calculate or how to trade your stuff to make money instead of losing money.
How the player progression works is you research these different skills, which take real life time, and that ticks in the background. But some of these skills take literal weeks.
Yeah, you need to do things in order to make your research fast enough that it's viable to complete the research within your human lifetime.
Yeah. I remember one time this was still pretty early, and I was just starting out, and my ship blew up. Now the thing is, I had enough money that I could afford to buy parts to rebuild my ship. Now, even though I had the money, it took me an hour just to buy the parts to reassemble my ship. Because again, the parts are sold by actual players at and they put them up at different space stations. And especially because I wasn't in one of the central trading areas, so not every space station had all the parts I need. And so I'm spending an hour traveling around in my little escape pod just to buy parts so I can rebuild my very poor, cheap, low-level ship.
Well, we also started playing this game fairly early, so yep. I bet some of that might be ironed out for new players.
Now,
I had to guess.
No clue.
Yeah. What puts this on my favorite list is the shenanigans just before I actually stopped playing this game.
Oh my god, Eve has the best stories.
Yes. So, finding the best, most satisfying ways to make money took some time, but I decided to actually become essentially, I'm going to call it a reporter, but realistically, I was just a dirty, nasty little snitch. So I'd zip around in my stealth ship, and I made an in-game, essentially a blog, and this blog would basically be a report of what ships are sitting in an area, and there was ways that you could actually even find if there was a player or who is in stealth mode in a particular area, and so people could pay me in-game currency to look for particular players and keep tabs on them. And what ended up happening was I ended up working for a larger
like a
corporation.
digital private eye.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
a PI.
I was a digital PI, and I ended up working for one major clan. And one day they decided that they were going to have some payment issues, which was unfortunate for them because then I started working for the other side, which was another major player corporation. And at this point I decided to branch out, and instead of just being a PI, I did some sneaky shit where I essentially told the major commanders of these two major clans that there was a large hub of undefended ships in the same location. And so they both came to this epic location expecting to have no resistance, and instead found a fantastic fight. And then I worked with a few other players who we all had salvage ships. And after this epic fight broke down and there was nothing but wreckage, we swooped in there in our stealth salvage ships and sucked up all the cargo and then ran the fuck away before they could kill us.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Just a war profiteering espionage.
Yep.
That's awesome. One of the things that I absolutely love about EVE Online, unfortunately this was another game that was during the internet dark period, the dark ages for me, so I couldn't couldn't play it much. If it was completely free, I might have stuck with it, but I couldn't justify paying a monthly fee for a game that I couldn't actually play properly.
Yeah.
But
yeah, in theory, if you get good enough at the in-game economy, you can actually afford to buy your monthly subscription with in-game currency.
Yeah,
but you have to get fairly good at it.
So, and because of that's why there exists a actual ISK to US dollars conversion rate.
Yeah,
where
I should mention
because that middleman is there.
So the biggest ships that you see, the biggest battles that you see will regularly make the news. Because so much shenanigans goes down. They actually have a mechanic where if enough players are having a big brawl, they will slow down time up to 10 times slower than real time to allow these battles to happen without crashing the server.
Yeah, because here's one of the craziest things about it that I was actually just about to bring up is that this is an MMO on one server. Everybody is on the same server. Other MMOs, like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14, they're sharded over a bunch of different servers so that, things can run nicely. EVE, no, everything is on the same server because the developers have this insane sense of scope for this game.
Yep. And so in the wreckage of these giant battles, and to give you a sense of scope, one of those big titans might be worth anywhere between $2,000 to $12,000 real-world dollars of resources that was required to build these ships. So,
and it all goes up in digital smoke.
Yep, and
digital salvageable smoke.
Yep.
And you hope to God that whoever had those ships actually insured it. Yes, that's right. They have insurance for when your ship blows up, and you can buy varying tiers.
And these titans also take a really long time to actually manufacture. So you can if you know where people are manufacturing these titans, you can swoop in on them while they're mid-construction and fuck them up real bad.
Oh yeah. So apparently, I'm just looking at as always, the largest battle ever is of course not that old. Last July. So the largest battle, according to this article, which was July 2020, had 8,825 players in one battle.
Yeah, that's unheard of.
It's crazy. No other game that I know of is even remotely close to the scope of that. 8,000 players in one multiplayer battle. It's ridiculous.
And one of the other cool things that the developers have done is that they've created this framework for the players to interact with, and they've designed it in a way that the the players can do really crazy shit because it's so flexible. Like, one of the best stories I've heard about EVE is that there was this one, like, gigantic corporation that wanted to reroute trade. So they got as many people in the corporation as they could to buy as many, like, cheap, fast ships as they could, and all sent them to this one specific, like, central choke point, basically, in high security space. Now, if you remember Sean was talking about how in high security space, if you do shit that's against the law, the space police will show up and blow you out of the sky. Well, they had so many of these small ships to keep the space police occupied and continue fucking up other regular ass people that it became a hot zone where regular people couldn't go through there to trade because they'd probably get blown up.
Oh yeah, this was in Jita, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And so they had to like go around. They couldn't trade in this specific hub.
Yeah. So basically, like if you to give you context of what this is like essentially if a terrorist group basically just dropped down to Wall Street in New York and shut down like all of American like stock trading through New York, and did so by having so many people there that the police were just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That's basically what this was like, but in the digital space.
Yeah,
Also that they could get you to conduct your trades on the Toronto Stock Exchange instead.
Yeah, and that was the entire point. And it's great because a lot of MMOs have safe player spaces that are 100% safe. You can't fuck with people in safe player space. EVE technically has a safe place for the players, but that's only because of the NPC police. And because they had such large numbers distracting the space police, they were able to like get around that like, you know, safe player space.
Yeah.
To just like create this chaos that is unheard of in any other MMO.
Yeah, well, and I think honestly the reason it's unheard of in any other MMO is because there's no other dev team that has committed so strongly to the idea that yes, this is a simulation of a virtual world, and ultimately it is like a competitive interstellar civilization in space. It's going to be anarchic. That's just like how it would be, right? You have this like anarchic, like corporate run, like vaguely, fairly dystopian universe, actually, or galaxy, I suppose. And the developers have committed fully to that. If you get, like, if there's a massive like war scale event like this where this corporation of players commits these like acts that are illegal, quote unquote illegal, inside the game, it doesn't matter. Like the devs support that, the outcomes of that to remain, right? Like if it's like, even if it's somewhat of an exploit, not a hack, but like just like abusing the game mechanics, their opinion is that is supported, right? Like these players worked within the rules to exploit other players, but that is within that is within what the developers want to be able to happen in this world.
The devs put out a statement after what I was talking about, and they, instead of saying like, oh, these players, like, they shouldn't be like making this a horrible place for, you know, people to be able to like trade safely, they were like, fuck yes, look at this, look at what we've created, this is what our game allows people to do.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think that
attitude is so crazy.
Basically, no other like major MMO where the developers are like, yeah, we made a virtual world where massive like crimes can be committed,
crimes and fuckery,
fuckery can be committed with enough preparation, and we support it. Like, there's no other MMO I know of where the devs support that kind of behavior.
I'll end this with a very crazy statistic. So the in-game currency, the ISK, the most expensive ship is worth $500 billion ISK. And to convert that in US dollars is $4.1 billion for a single ship. If it were ever to hit the market. Now, if it were to hit the market, it might literally hit it with a giant nuclear weapon, which they're capable of carrying, that drains all the energy out of of an area.
And so that's kind of like what I was mentioning before, where the absolute largest and most valuable ships in the game are literally so expensive that even an individual in real life could not buy them. And so they're pretty much strictly the domain of large corporate warfare.
Yeah.
And also, they take a long time in-game to actually physically construct, which is why, for example, the whole thing where Sean is acting as a private eye to detect where ships are, there's actually been a lot of espionage-type operations going on where the various corporations try to find out where enemy corporations are building their capital ships, because they actually sometimes will try and go and destroy an under construction ship, kind of like the plot of Star Wars, right? Trying to go and blow up the Death Star while it's under construction, because if you wait too long, it'll be finished, and then they'll have a massive weapon. Mm-hmm. And that's just so cool, right? That they have this virtual world where you can kind of have those events play out. I can't think of any other MMO even close.
Yeah.
That said, it's a massive time sink.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got to fly into that deep end, and your free time will disappear.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so my top 3 games, for me, exists on a different tier than everything else. It's a bit frustrating to, when people ask my favorite game, I want to say these 3 games, because they're just just on another level for me. And all 3 for different reasons. Now, my number 3 game is my favorite.
I think before you get into it, I think when you're talking about the greatest game of all time, or the greatest few games, it's really difficult, because you get into some things say genre differences, or just different, very different ways of playing a game where it's not quite comparable. Like the greatest platformer versus the greatest shooter, it's a totally different game.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard to judge them against each other, And so I think that definitely, for me, that plays into the difficulty in ranking, the top few games.
Yeah. So my number 3 is my favorite in terms of just objective quality, I would say. And that's the game released in North America as Fire Emblem. Now, this is Fire Emblem 7, Blazing Sword. This is not the one with Roy, and not the one with Marth.
I believe it was the first one in North America. It was on the Game Boy Advance.
Correct.
Yeah,
it's actually a prequel to Fire Emblem 6, which does have Roy in it. And I love a certain period of Fire Emblem games. We'll go into this on another episode, or maybe some solo content, because
the pre-Waifu Simulator era.
Yes, because I have a very long rant about Fire Emblem as a series, but to stick with this one and why I love it so much is that it's got some of the tightest gameplay of any strategy game, RPG or otherwise, I've ever played. The Fire Emblem games, basically, you have this army of unique characters with unique, stat growths and unique classes, and you build them up over this pretty linear story in these battles where usually you're outnumbered, and it's pretty stock standard tactical RPG stuff. But what makes Fire Emblem 7 so incredible is that I think so many of the maps are so expertly designed. One of my favorite things about the series is its focus on macro objectives and micro objectives. Now, you always have your one, macro objective of, kill the boss,
protect a civilian,
protect an area, just rout the enemy. That your going towards. But there's in most of the maps, there's micro objectives. There's these treasure chests off to the side that there's an enemy thief that's going to take them over a certain period of time. So if you want this extra shit, you got to devote some of your troops to go over there, or a village that might be pillaged. Same thing, or a particular character on the enemy team that you can recruit. So you need to ferry one of your units that can recruit it over there.
And all these things are usually on a timeline, because either that village is going to be destroyed by an enemy or the chest is going to get stolen. And once that thief steals it, you can kill the thief and get it back, but that thief but that thief is trying to leave the map.
Yeah, thieves are pretty speedy, so they can outrun most infantry.
Yeah, or if you're trying to recruit an enemy character, that enemy character might attack one of your characters and only
die in the counterattack.
Yeah, die in the counterattack.
Yeah, and also sometimes the character that you want to recruit, the character you need to recruit them, might not be one of the characters that you've been using for a while, so they might be really low level. So that adds an extra layer of you need to, protect this unit as you ferry them over to this new character that you want to get. And it's that's one of the things that has been really lacking in the later Fire Emblem games, that I think just makes these just far better strategy games. Like, the tactical gameplay of Fire Emblem, even in the later games, has always been pretty good. But the overall strategy of what you want to do in any of these individual levels, like these micro objectives, make it so that these levels are interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I definitely recall, because I think the most recent one I played was Awakening, and it's definitely less interesting in the maps than 7.
Yeah. And also, one of the other things I like about it is that in a lot of tactical RPGs, you have a pretty small squad of units that you bring into any individual level. And compare that to just turn-based strategy games that aren't RPGs, generally. Like Advance Wars, you have a much larger group of units under your control. In Fire Emblem, it's a little bit unique in that you have all these unique units, but you also get to bring a fair amount of them onto the battlefield for any individual map. You get to bring, between 8 to 12 of them every map and stuff. So that gives you a lot more flexibility and options in how you approach things, to where, like, in another tactics game, you might have, 5 characters, so you might bring, a tanky character, a magic character, a character with healing, a good movement character, and stuff. And that doesn't... You've kind of got one of each main category of unit, and then you're out of units. Yeah, and you need those units to perform their specific tasks. Yeah.
Whereas in Fire Emblem, you can go with totally different strategies, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and have split up your units into bunches that might have that same kind of composition, but you're controlling them on multiple fronts, which is so much more interesting.
Yeah, one of the things that I was doing a lot with Awakening, because that was just the one I most recently played. For some reason, I got into this habit of having a very large Pegasus Knight squad, and then I'd load up the Pegasus Knight squad. And in Awakening, it has this ability where you can group 2 units together and then switch between them. And so I'd load up this Pegasus Knight squad, which has high mobility, really strong against magic users, but not very good against something like a barbarian with an axe,
and weak to archers.
Yeah, and very weak to archery. But you can almost use it I was basically using it as sort of like a transport, right? Where you just you drive these flying Pegasus Knights deep behind the enemy, and then kind of switch to the stronger characters that were paired with them, and then basically be able to attack the enemy from both in front and behind at the same time. Now, that's an optional strategy. It's not something that I had to do. It's just something I liked doing because I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
And there's other strategies as well. I mean, another thing you could do is just you could load up on ranged characters, right? Because again, you'd still be able to bring like some magic users and some sword users and some like axe users and whatnot to take advantage of like the weapon triangle buffs in the game, and just like some core mechanics, like having some tanks and stuff like that. But then you have extra choices that you can choose to put. You can kind of choose the play style of the army that you prefer. And yeah, I definitely feel like a lot of other tactical strategy turn-based tactical strategy games that are in the style of Fire Emblem, they typically, you have kind of enough slots to pick just your core different classes and then not much else. And so definitely the flexibility and customization in Fire Emblem is very, very cool.
Yeah, and you mentioned the weapon triangle. That's something else that's like very, very useful, that you have these it's very useful for a player when you have that kind of system in a game, that you have this at a glance, like rock paper scissors aspect to it, to where in most of the games, swords are good against axes are good against spears are good against swords. So you have a better chance to hit, and you do a little bit more damage. Now, it's not to say that you can't put a sword user against a spear user and have success. You can still do that if the units are, if the sword user has better stats and whatnot. But it's a subtle way of hinting towards the player on how they should use their army and place their army. Like, if you see like 4 axe users in a corner, you can. A lot of the times you could send one speedy sword user to just take care of them, because axes, have low accuracy. And so you could just like deal with 4 units with one.
Yeah,
unit.
Just like you drop a Myrmidon in there, which is a high speed, high skill sword user, and they just dodge everything and double strike the axe users.
Yeah. And one awesome thing about the player progression is that you have a chance for any particular stat to go up every level, and so a lot of characters will end up like being in a certain mold. Like, some characters have high speed growth, so they're generally going to be speedy. But sometimes RNGesus just does not look favorably upon you. And you have characters that are, generally pretty good units that just like flounder in their stats. Or sometimes you have units that just get completely godly. And other times you get characters that are like the inverse of what they're supposed to be. That happened to me once, where I had this there's a character, Hector, who's one of the like main lords of the game that you use throughout pretty much the entire game, and a lot levels he's mandatory, where he's this big burly dude with an axe, high armor, high attack, like one of the most reliable units you can have, where he didn't gain a single point of strength in 14 levels. And he has like a 60% chance of gaining strength a level.
That
or something
is brutal.
Like 50 or 60%. But he got a ton of speed. So it got to the point where he actually had more speed than strength. And so,
Hector?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that ended up working like really cool, because he was this very speedy, and he still had like really good defense. So he wasn't taking much damage from attacks, and generally the advantage of high-speed units is that they can, as Alex said, double attack in one round. Where
so the power didn't matter so much.
The power didn't matter as much, and enemies, were only attacking Hector once, so his high defense worked even better, where instead of, taking 3 damage twice, he was only taking 3 damage once. So he was even tankier than normal. So it's cool. It's cool shit like that makes each run feel kind of unique. And again, you can't use every character like on every run, because you can only bring 8 to 12 characters, and there's a cast of like 36 characters or something. So you kind of have to pick and choose who you want to focus on, or else your entire army's going to fall behind. So that lends the game to a lot of replayability. I replay this game once every like 18 months.
How many times have you played Fire Emblem 7? I know it's a lot.
I've beaten that game probably 15 plus times.
Yeah.
And each run can take like 25 hours.
Yeah, it's a long
Amazing.
game.
Yeah.
It's a long game too. Like each map could take like, half hour.
And sometimes you'll fuck up because there's permadeath in the game. So if you're a player like me and a character dies, you say, nope, quit, restart the mission. Nobody dies on my watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Dirty save scumming.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't call it save scumming because you have to, if you want to do that, you have to restart from the very beginning of the map. So,
Yeah, okay, that's
save
fair.
scumming is something like XCOM. You can choose a save in the middle of a match where it's just like, oh, I have a 40% shot chance that I really need to hit. Let me create a save here, and then if it misses, reload the save and do something else.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
I feel like, just to note on XCOM, another really good turn-based strategy game. XCOM really is better when you don't save scum because the stakes feel a lot more real.
Yeah, and there's permadeath in that game, but soldiers are expendable in that game. You can always get more.
Except for your favorite soldier. And then the urge to save scum becomes
dies
very
on the
high.
third to last mission. I'm like, shit, that was my best sniper.
Yeah. Or going back, I think there's always like games where, like, I talked about Dwarf Fortress in I think the first episode of this miniseries, and Dwarf Fortress was a game that really does not want you to save scum at all. You actually have to physically go in and move files around to do save scumming in that game. Because it's really against the entire ethos of that game, and it really does ruin it. Because like it just the facts of like really committing to it, and whatever happens has happened. It really makes certain games enjoyable in the way that the game is.
Yeah, and so because Fire Emblem 7 is a GBA game,
I totally do the same thing in Fire Emblem though. If someone dies, restart.
Yeah. Because it's a GBA game, which, portable system, limited battery, it actually creates a suspend save after every game action that you do. So even if your battery runs out, you still have a suspend save right where you were. And so, you literally can't save scum in a mission, because if you, do an action, and, that action, would cause your unit to die, and you turn the game off and you reload it, guess what? It'll reload that suspend save in that action, and your character's still going to die. So, yeah, it's a beautifully designed game.
This reminds me, I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this game, but it was turn-based. I think it was some sort of Greek setting, and if you save scummed, the developers built a mechanic where these immortal beings would hunt down your party and kill one of your characters,
wow,
in perpetuity, until one of them was dead and dragged their soul away, and then you just wouldn't have that character anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I remember this. I can't remember what game it was either, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck. It's gonna bug me.
I always like it when devs do that, though. It's
Right?
cool. Even I think Animal Crossing,
Yeah.
Mr. Rossetti.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Rossetti.
It's so funny. All right, so I'll go into my number 3 top game now, which is an utter classic. I'm sure we've all played it. It is probably my favorite platformer of all time, Super Mario World. 2D platformer. Favorite 2D platformer. It's difficult to compare 2D and 3D, but I love Super Mario World. Super Mario World is my favorite Mario platformer. It's got great platforming. It's got tight controls. It's got lovely music. Love the music in Super Mario World. And the thing, one of the interesting things I find about Super Mario World, and one of the reasons I think it's in some ways the peak 2D Mario, is because not only does it have really cool items, like the cape. It's got Yoshi, and you can bring Yoshi into every level of the game, which some of the other Mario games don't allow you to do. And it's also got a really cool overworld. This is actually something that I have found sorely lacking in the newer two-dimensional Mario, like side-scrolling Mario games, is that they've made the overworld almost entirely linear, whereas it's still somewhat linear in Super Mario World. Obviously, there's worlds, and you go between them,
and they're super,
and they are super. Especially the Super Star bonus world, which is incredible. Super Mario World had probably some of my favorite bonus levels in the Star World. Really cool. And then you can also use the Star World. It's interesting because you can unlock access to the bonus world before actually finishing the game. Because the way the bonus world works, you unlock. At least if I'm remembering this correctly, I think so. I think you can get in there. But there's secret entrances in every world into the Star World, and you can use the Star World as almost like a fast travel across the overworld, and then you can go between them after unlocking the various shortcuts into the Star World. So, and that just gets into like one of the things I think that Super Mario World did really right that a lot of other Mario games didn't, especially newer ones, which is that the overworld is very dynamic and interesting. It has branching paths, it has secrets, it has secret levels that you might not even unlock if you aren't careful or if you don't play the game like enough. And that's something that I always love that. I always love a game that has these secrets and these additional paths. And even if some of them are a bit silly and not necessary, I mean, it's not like you have to, like you're probably going to beat all the various paths eventually. But I think it just adds more interest to the game, being able to choose how you kind of go through it. Mm-hmm. And
a lot of those levels too, like some of the bonus levels, and were almost like puzzle platformers instead, and especially the ghost houses.
Oh yeah, the ghost houses in particular are they're puzzly as fuck. Some of those ghost houses are really difficult, and I mean I swear there's a ghost house with 3 exits in that game. There's a lot of interesting level design in Super Mario World. So not only is the overworld branching, but some of the levels themselves are you could call them branching in that to get to the alternate exits of a level requires finding a secret path and then following that path to the secret exit. And I just love I love stuff like that. It's really cool. I don't know why they have sort of they've kind of abandoned that in some of the newer ones. The 2D, like the new Super Mario Bros. Games, they're just not as lively in the in the secret exits and branching over world and stuff like that. They're still fun, but I really do think that Super Mario World is basically the peak of the 2D Mario games. Yeah, I don't know what you guys felt with Super Mario World.
I've never played it.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you not have a SNES?
No.
Wait, seriously?
Seriously.
How are we just finding out about this now?
How? What?
Yeah. I was Game Boy Color, and then N64 was my next console after that. I never had the SNES. I did play it a lot with my cousins.
Well, damn.
But, yep.
It looks like you were wrong in the intro to this game, Alex. Not everybody has played this game.
I guess not.
I'm
shocked.
Well, you might not like what I have to say. I don't like Super Mario World.
I
played
know.
it. I don't like it.
I know you don't like Super Mario World. That's why this is going to be interesting. Interesting. Talk.
Yeah, I vastly prefer Super Mario Bros. 3.
Yeah.
I'm actually not that big of a platformer fan in general, so that has something to do with it. I don't know. I just didn't like the levels and like the enemies in Super Mario World. I didn't like as much as the other games. I don't know. It just didn't strike me as much as like the first 3 Mario games did.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it was...
I can still see that as an incredibly expertly crafted game. Like, don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of extremely good things about it, and when people, say it's their favorite platformer or it's their third favorite game, I'm not shaking my head and thinking, God, what's wrong with this person? They have bad taste. Like, I see where that's coming from.
Yeah, but yeah, it definitely, and I think also partly it marked a bit of a directional change. Like, there were a lot of new things they introduced in Super Mario World.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's the first game where Yoshi was actually even in it.
Yoshi only existed in the Yoshi's Cookie before this.
And so I love Yoshi. I don't know, something about Yoshi gameplay. I've always liked it. Any games got Yoshi, I love it. Yeah. But
also have the spin jump.
Yeah, well, there was cool stuff with Yoshi too, where like you have the different shells, and Yoshi has different abilities depending on what kind of Koopa shell he has in his mouth. I swear they've just dropped that entirely. I don't even think that's in other games that have Yoshi, which is really, I don't get it. I don't get why you'd take such a cool mechanic and just get rid of it. Because you get like red shells. You shoot at a red shell, he shoots fire. Blue shell gives you wings to fly. Yellow shell gives you like this ground pound ability. And they just got rid of that entirely. And I'm like, why? It's cool. And in fact, because it's sort of an optional ability where you don't always have Yoshi, that was one of the ways they added secrets into the game, was that there were some secrets you could only access with Yoshi with a particular shell in the mouth.
Yeah.
And it's just that sort of, those small details that allow you to add these secrets to the game, where there might be a side path that requires you to bring Yoshi into a level and then get him a blue shell and then fly up to the secret, right? Or maybe a cape, but that's the thing. Sometimes the secrets have different ways to get to it too, which again just adds to the sort of interest level of the game and lets you get more from replaying it. Which in Super Mario World, I found that you tend to be replaying levels sometimes just to either get more of the secret coins or try to unlock a secret exit, or just to farm lives. And having these subtle details that allow you to experience the level in a different way was really cool. Also, you could get different colors of Yoshis, which, like, a red Yoshi always shoots fire with the fireball, right? And so just there's these cool touches in World, some of which they kind of just dropped and didn't bring back, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, well, I think at least with a lot of the new Super Mario Bros. Games, they added multiplayer, and so those levels also have to be designed in a way that makes multiplayer viable. And so some of the more puzzly aspects of the levels have to go in that circumstance.
Yeah, definitely that's part of it, especially when you're talking about multiplayer levels as an option.
Yeah, because like trying to do puzzly stuff in a multiplayer platforming setting when you all have collision against each other, that's probably going to lead to more frustration than elation.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's always going to be a bit of a... That's one thing with Nintendo, is that I'd say Nintendo definitely these days is aiming at a broader audience than they were in, 1991 or whenever that game came out?
Yeah.
Maybe 1993. I don't remember the date, but
Whenever the SNES was launched.
Early 90s, Nintendo was definitely catering to a different audience than they are today. And I get it. But that's why World, I think, is still, for me, the peak of the 2D Mario series.
Cool.
All right, well, on to my number 3 S-tier game, which is also a Mario game.
Okay.
Mario Kart 64.
Ooh.
This game was...
I mean, I totally disagree on 64 being the best entry in the series, but I love Mario Kart.
I would argue it's the worst entry in the series.
Really?
Well, please expose about how you like it first. I don't just want shit on it immediately.
All right, so Super Mario 64
Tune in for the best. Tune in for the favorite games of all time. This game sucks.
You know what I'll say? I understand. Like, to me, the Mario Kart series has evolved strongly, and if I look at the one that I would say was a very close second place, so Mario Kart 64 holds its spot due to the nostalgia and the experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
The one that came very close second is actually Mario Kart Double Dash.
Okay.
Because of that fascinating mechanic. But, yeah, so the Mario Kart series, Mario Kart specifically, on the N64, there were very few games that brought together a multiplayer experience that could bring you back together with your friends again and again and again. Mm-hmm. Not just, playing the game, but even playing the same circuit, the same battle mode, over and over and over again. And over time, the games would begin with learning the courses well, and proceed to then, focusing on the mechanics of just being good at racing. And ended ultimately in finding different cheesy ways to do really funny things. For example, the shortcuts in Rainbow Run and whatnot. But
Rainbow Run?
Oh, yes.
Rainbow Road?
Rainbow Road, there we go. I'm mangling my memories there. Yeah, so for me, it was, Mario Kart 64, compared to the other games, you go, well, the gameplay of the other ones has definitely evolved. But
okay. One thing I just want to say, the one thing I love most about Mario Kart 64 on Rainbow Road, since that just came up, you can shortcut like half the map on Rainbow Road in the N64
game. Yeah, I was
game.
just saying that.
Oh.
Yep.
Wow.
I'm busy plugging in your laptop.
I'm too, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I left the room for a minute there and clearly missed it. But that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
It's so stupid, but I love it.
See? And in intense moments that connect people. Not like that.
And then there would be just moments of exploration. Like, for example, on the Calamari Desert level, trying to go through the train tunnel and getting run over by the train catastrophically. Very fun. Trying to be able to get to that, the item block on the top of the Koopa Island level.
The one you gotta, like, jump through into a cave?
Yeah. Seeing if you could try and land on the boat.
Yeah, Mario Kart 64 had some really cool shortcuts and sort of things to just screw around with.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really, plays into your point that you were bringing up earlier about how it just, brings, your friends together to play this thing is that I'm not the biggest fan of the N64. I was more of a PlayStation kid, but what some of the N64 did so much better is just it had 4 controller ports. So you could have a game like Mario Kart 64 that you couldn't really get on something like the PlayStation, where even if you had a multi-tap, those things never fucking worked.
Yeah. And then anytime a game requires accessories, it's just much less likely to actually get penetration in the market.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, the N64 had an adapter to support 8 players. as far as I know, only one game actually used it, and it was a weird basketball game that you could do 4-on-4 basketball on the N64.
That's crazy.
But but to do so, you would have had to have this specialized multi-tap for the N64, as well as 8 controllers for one single game. Like, I don't think I ever actually played that game with 8 players, even though it did support it. I don't even remember which game it was anymore.
Yeah. So with the Mario Kart series, what I found is that the innovations that came after that game, they're all cool and they're all fun. But when I look back, all of the themes for the levels harken back to mostly Mario Kart 64, and some of them hark back even earlier to the Mario Kart games before that.
I mean, there was only one.
Yeah.
For the sense.
And it really has stuck with me. Sometimes I remember playing with one of my friends, and we were taking a look at my collection of N64 games. I'm like, well, which one do you want to play? And her hand just immediately went to Super Mario 64, and I'm like, oh, this poor girl. She's about to suffer the fate of someone who is still really good at this game, and I kicked her out so
you said Super Mario 64.
Not Mario Kart 64.
Mario Kart 64.
There we
My
go.
goodness.
Let's get clean take so I can edit that in of you saying Mario Kart 64.
Mario Kart 64.
Awesome. I'm not editing that in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, and in fact, like the whole Mario lineup, there was my subconscious, thoughts is Super Mario 64, solid game, sunk, of all the games that I've passionately finished, they've all been on the N64, and specifically in the Mario series. For example, I finished Super Mario 64, but I never got to finish Banjo-Kazooie. And I finished Mario Party 2. That's right. You can finish the Mario Party game. There's hidden mini games that you can unlock, and that one I'm sure you guys have tons of memories playing with me from. Some more agonizing than others.
Yeah, Mario Party is very fun. I don't think it made any of our lists, but it's definitely a fun game.
It was a close contender, but I thought, as good as it was also agonizing at times with some of the multiplayer games, and the ennui from that antagonizing aspect of the game kind of made the Mario Kart one win the cake there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's number 3.
Cool. So my number 2 is my favorite game based on nostalgia. And this is Monster Rancher 2. Monster Rancher has, pound for pound, bar none, the best gimmick in any video game ever released. And it's a gimmick that does not work anymore.
Yep.
Because of how trends has changed. Just because in this game, it's a sort of like monster raising game where, like, some people compare it to Pokemon, but I think that's a horrible comparison. Where you have these monsters and you put them through various drills to raise their stats, send them on specialized training to learn different moves, and then you battle them. But how you get these monsters is Monster Rancher 2 is a PlayStation 1 game where you go into the Monster Shrine and you say, okay, I want a new monster. And they're like, okay, open your disc tray. Take Monster Rancher out of your system. Put in a different CD. Close your disc tray. Reads the CD. Okay, open it up, put Monster Rancher back in. And then it generates a monster based off of a specific metadata that's on the CD. So I spent hours sitting on the floor next to my PS1, just swapping CDs, seeing what I would get. And this experience, like as a kid, like before the internet, before you knew you could just look up like however many monsters were in the game and what they were and shit, like it was this feeling of like I have no idea what's coming next, and so I want to literally like rifle through this entire house for every single CD I can find, to see what I get out of this thing. And you could combine different monsters as well because each monster had a main type and a subtype the subtype would influence the monster stats. And you would, just raise these monsters, try to go through all the different tournament tiers from E rank all the way up to S rank, and then like this, there was a bunch of secrets to do. There's a ton of secret monsters in Monster Rancher 2, to where like maybe 40% of the discs that you'll put in will actually say like, hey, you need to unlock this monster first. And so I had a little notebook of discs I had locked monsters behind that I would write down, I need to unlock this monster for this disc, so I would keep a log of all that stuff. And the amount of just like hidden secrets and stuff was so cool to me. And the reason why I'm choosing 2 out of any of the Monster Rancher games is that it was the most mechanically dense and had a lot of really awesome mechanics that haven't been seen in the series since, that were a little bit arcane and obtuse at times.
So just note, so many of the games that have made the top 5 are all games that had unique mechanics in their series. Whether it's Battlefield, Super Mario World, Monster Rancher. This is what people love, okay? Game developers, bring back old mechanics.
Well, it goes back. I think I said on an earlier episode that
make new ones.
The thing that I love about games is when they have small mechanics that are just interesting and make sense, like retroactively. Like, it's not necessarily like you would think, oh, this game needs this type of mechanic to make it more dense and awesome. It's, oh, they put in this mechanic that makes the gameplay more dense and more awesome, and I would have never thought of it, but it totally makes sense. For example, there are a few different subtypes of monsters that have unique moves to them that are based off of the subtype. For example, there's a pixie class of monsters that are all like magic based, and so if you have a monster with a pixie subtype, a few of them could learn a lightning spell that they could use, and that was super cool. Or the fact that certain monster techniques had a chain to them, to where you need to use one move a bunch to unlock the next move in the sequence. And what was interesting about that is you need to use those moves a lot, and monsters have limited lifespan before they legit die and are gone.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's kind of like a Tamagotchi.
Yeah. And like you get warnings saying like, oh, your monster's like about to croak. Maybe you should.
This is a harsh game.
It's very harsh, man. Holy shit! And the death animations like almost made me cry. But so because of that, you can go and freeze your monsters and then combine them into new monsters. And because your old monsters had like good stats and have used all these moves, your new monsters will have some percentage of those increased stats, and also retain how often you use moves for tech chains. So you don't have to do that again. You don't have to put them through a ton of battles to learn these new better moves. So it really encouraged you to kind of like horse breeding or something. Yeah. Just breed like a thoroughbred, I raised these parents specifically to make this one awesome child monster instead that's going to rise through the ranks and going to grant me victory.
Yeah, it's funny actually. It makes it like the breeding seems way more necessary than in a game like, say, Pokemon, where the breeding is basically totally optional.
Yeah, you only need breeding for if you want to play ultra competitively. It's not required for the main game. But Monster Rancher 2 is fucking hard. It's really difficult. The monsters in the higher tiers of tournaments, you need to be on your shit to get monsters that are on the same level.
Wow.
And as well, the game also, I think, supported the largest variety of tactics. You had monsters that were super high power, but but were super slow. So they were going to get hit a lot, but you just need to hit your opponent with one good move and they'd be knocked the fuck out. or speed monsters that you just want to dodge everything, get a couple hits in, and wait for time to expire, and then the monster with the most health wins. Or monsters that focused on draining your opponent's willpower because you needed a certain resource that built up over time to use whatever moves your monsters had. So you just want to drain them of all their resources so they couldn't ever do any move. And literally just, you'd win with like you at 100% HP and your opponent at 95% HP after like the minute-long battle.
Oh my god.
Because you just stop them from doing anything. And there's something insane like 35 different types of main versions of monsters, along with all the subtypes that modify how you might raise them. It had such a breadth of play options that it's just so incredible. Yeah, and I think that's about all I have to say about that.
Yeah, one of the memories I have, and I think this was 2, but we were at a friend's house.
Oh, this was 4, but I remember.
Okay, this was
story.
4, but I mean the concept is the same.
Yeah,
but we were at a friend's house for an overnight, and we had a Monster Rancher game. And the thing is, at his house, he had a whole whack of Bollywood movies.
Yes.
and so with the mechanic of getting a new monster by inserting like different discs, we were like, oh, what are we going to get from these Bollywood movies? And the crazy thing is, like, these Bollywood movies just for some reason gave us the most ridiculous monsters ever.
Yeah, and one of them gave us this sick like living armor. Yeah, like yellow living armor guy with a sword.
Yeah, this
like
like
a Durahan that was super sick looking.
Yeah, just a gold living armor guy. Gold suit. I think we had like a cool ghost out of one of them, or something like that.
And it's like, and those associations that you make between these real life physical discs as the monsters you get from them. Like I remember the second disc on some like shitty compilation of Christmas songs gave me this sick techno scorpion. Yeah, like that kind of shit was so awesome.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool mechanic. It's unfortunate that a mechanic like that doesn't really work at all with digital games, digital downloads, and things like that.
Like the entire like digital nature of everything now means that like the physical thing is hard to acquire, hard to copy. If you trying to do this in a digital space would be a bit more difficult to where like people could just post, whatever like, text string or something to generate whatever monster you want. It's a bit more difficult. The Game Boy Advance Monster Rancher games used a password system, which just that was still fun in a way, but it just wasn't the same when you could literally go online and look up whatever. Hey, I want this specific monster. Oh, hey, this password gets you it. Like,
right. really kind of lacks the discovery aspect, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my number 2 game. This is a game that I've had a lot of fun with. I've gone to it back over the years, and a bit of an interesting genre too. So, Worms Armageddon.
Yes. Oh my god. Until you said that your number 1 game is probably something that we haven't played, this was my pick. What I thought your number 1 was going to be.
I love Worms Armageddon. I was actually debating. I thought about putting it in number 1 because it is an amazing game. So the Worms series is. It's in. I can't remember what the term for the genre is.
Artillery game is the closest.
Yeah,
Scorched Earth like.
Scorched Earth like or artillery game. So basically, the way Worms works is that you have a team of worms, and you can, and it's turn based, and you can move around the map, either walking or squirming around the map, and then there's movement items, and then you have items, right? Some of them are things like movement items, like you might have a ninja rope or a teleporter or a jetpack, or a parachute, things like that to move around. And then you have weapons. And the thing about the Worms games is that the weapons are crazy.
They are.
Like the most basic of weapons in the game is basically a bazooka. And the bazooka is affected by. So you choose the trajectory and power of your weapons, and then some of the weapons are affected by wind. Some of them aren't, like grenades are not affected by wind, and so your goal is to just attack the other opponent's worms. But the other thing about the Worms games is that the map you're on is destructible, and all of the weapons affect the terrain in different ways. Some of the weapons, like the bazooka, make a large single hole. Some of the weapons, like say a cluster mine, might blow up and then make a bunch of smaller holes in the map. Other weapons might, like the shotgun, which in the shotgun in Worms Armageddon is more like a sniper rifle.
Yep.
Which is funny, and it doesn't make a lot. That's more of a precision weapon, actually, the precision shotgun.
Yeah,
and,
such a good variety.
And then there's also some ridiculous weapons, like a banana. The banana is a weapon.
One of the most devastating weapons in the game.
The banana is one of the most devastating weapons in the game. It explodes in a massive explosion that then triggers several other bananas to emerge in random directions, and they also have a bunch of really large explosions. A single banana could take out a quarter of the map on a smaller map.
And like it's also awkward because the banana like bounces like a football.
Yeah. It bounces like a football, and the bouncing is very unpredictable because of that. There's other weapons.
There's a lot of weapons in Worms that you're more of a danger to yourself than your enemies with a lot of them sometimes.
Yeah, there's airstrikes. There's a concrete donkey that falls from the sky and just bounces and keeps blowing up in large explosions. There's a holy hand grenade.
The best weapon, the holy hand grenade.
The holy hand grenade. Pretty much a joke on that Monty Python skit that just blows up in a very large explosion.
Hallelujah.
And
I can hear it now.
Sings hallelujah. And so the fun thing about Worms is that it has a single player campaign, which is sort of cool. But then the multiplayer is really where it was at.
Yeah.
The hot seat turn-based multiplayer was some of the most fun I ever had. And you'd have some friends over, you'd have, there's just the one computer, and you go to town. You'd be like, all right, you boot up Worms, you go, you pick how crazy you want to get. Maybe you have a more relaxed mode that has more of the normal weapons. Maybe you go crazy with like Armageddon mode. You turn on all of the busted, broken weapons.
The donkey, the iron donkey.
Yeah, super sheep, which is a controllable sheep that explodes, And then another cool mode was you could have it where people start with no weapons at all, because there's also crates that can fall, and you collect new weapons from crates. Mm-hmm. And then that was kind of cool because there were a lot of interesting modes where you'd put on a lot of mobility items, like the ninja rope, and then
fucking ninja rope.
All of the weapons you get, you collect from crates, which give you random weapons, which is a very chaotic but also fun mode, because it's very unpredictable what's going to happen.
I've never encountered a movement option quite like the ninja rope in any other game, where it's just like it's equal parts super frustrating, but also super like intuitive isn't the right word for it, but you can get a lot of like awesome shit done with it.
Yeah, and it's very...
Alex in particular. I remember. I know you're known for your crazy ninja rope abilities.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really satisfying to have the ninja rope work well. Although,
and really funny when it doesn't,
and pretty skill intensive too. It's difficult to get it to like the highest level, but if you can use it well, you can like attach the thing, swing all like, and extend it to swing like around an obstacle,
Yeah.
jump,
Yeah,
shoot
so,
it again.
so I guess
So
I didn't
insane.
quite mention this. It was implied, but being an artillery game, the game is very physics based,
Right,
and the ninja. Whereas normally you're trying to figure out the angles and power and speed and wind resistance of your weapons. The ninja rope, it's all about how those things affect your worm itself, because with the ninja rope, it's very momentum based, and I mean, you can literally, if you get the momentum up, you can fling yourself across the entire map like a cannonball with your character. But of course, that's very dangerous because you're just as likely to fly off into the ocean and kill yourself,
or even not even just be going so fast that you take fall damage and then your turn ends.
yeah, or
Yep.
or end up hitting something and colliding with fall damage, maybe landing on a mine that explodes.
Go straight from zoom to boom.
Yeah, so the ninja rope's really cool. A bit of a risky movement item when you're trying to go very far, very fast. And the turns have a time limit, which is adjustable, so that affects how things play out as well. And yeah,
I'll say that one of the greatest things about that game, similar to the weapons in Noita, is that the more powerful a weapon is, the more danger it is to you. And there's
Yeah.
something quite entertaining about, you either find or are about to use a most powerful weapon, and like inside you're just sweating internally because you're like, all right, so either I'm about to do something really awesome or I'm about to blow myself up.
There was a weapon literally called Armageddon that just rained fiery, explosive meteors from the sky that was almost guaranteed to wipe out every single thing in the level. So one of the things I like to do was there was an item called the girder, which just placed a small piece of terrain on the map. So what I would do was just like place as many girders as possible until everybody was out of girders, and then see who could survive the Armageddon.
Oh yeah, fun times on that one.
yeah, I think there might have even been a custom mode that triggered an Armageddon automatically on a specific turn.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you could set the sudden death to be Armageddon.
Yeah.
Because the sudden death usually was water that raised from the bottom, but I believe there was also an Armageddon version of sudden death that just triggers Armageddon every turn until once the game reaches a particular turn count. And so, yeah, there was literally a mode where Armageddon triggers on turn whatever, and everyone just has a bunch of girders and blowtorches to try and bunker themselves in to not die.
Yeah.
And then also the other thing, there's so many the customization options in Worms Armageddon.
Oh yeah.
There's you can name your team members, you can set custom voice packs and custom.
And like this was, I actually initially had played it on PS1, but Worms has mainly been a PC thing.
Mainly, yeah.
But like you could even go so, like there were a ton of already custom voice packs that you could use, but you could also, if you knew where to put the wave files, make your own.
Yeah, I had a Futurama one at one point, and there were lots of. They're pretty much custom voice packs for everything you could think of.
I think I had an Arnold Schwarzenegger one.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds hilarious. And so, yeah, you can customize your team with voices and hats and gravestones, and then you can also make custom maps. And some of the custom maps you could make, there was an inbuilt level editor where you could just draw stuff. But then if you knew what you were doing, you could actually take any PNG file and turn it into a custom map.
Yeah.
I actually made a custom map of a Phoenix Wright courtrum that you could just blow up and play on, which was really silly but awesome.
Yeah. One of the fun things about that map was that there was a slope like Phoenix Wright's sprite, or his side was, that was just steep enough that if you fell onto it, you just tumble into the water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then
Countless hours.
There
of
have been some other. There have been other entries in the series since Worms Armageddon, but honestly, Worms Armageddon
it was the peak.
It was the peak. It
Truly.
Even now, it has such a depth of weapons. I mean, there's something like 50 or 60 weapons in the game. Weirdly, it has, I think, the highest worm count. Like some of the new, like that was really silly. There was a newer one, and then it supported a lower number of worms per team than Armageddon. I don't know why. It's stupid. And the graphics were actually fairly good because they're fairly simple and very colorful and kind of almost cartoon-like. And so the graphics still pretty much hold up with Armageddon too. And the gameplay is so well. The gameplay and physics engine is. I mean, it's not doing anything particularly complicated, but it's very fluid and it works really well.
It feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels perfect for this sort of like arcadey artillery game that you're playing. And I love Worms Armageddon. It's
one of the things where like it's making a sequel to that is almost impossible because you nailed it. It's perfect. Like
and
anything significant to add to it, like would change it too much.
Yeah,
Truly.
basically. And then they actually supported the game with some updates for a surprisingly long time. There was even like a major update to it like 10 years after release on PC or something like that. A lot of those updates did things like remove certain limitations on the game engine. Because the technology of computers had advanced to the point, like the worm count was increased at one point with one of the updates, so you could have more worms on the field at a time. Because computers 10 years after the original release were like a lot more powerful, and there was no risk of slowdown on a 2D game like that anymore. Yeah. So, especially given the updates the game had over time, it's basically perfect. The newer games that are still 2D Worms games, I mean, they've added some things. Like they've tried to add vehicles, and they've tried to add like castles, and they've tried to add. One of them added water, which was like water on the stage, which could flow, and those were all kind of interesting, but none of them really.
Like if you want to make a game that in like the Worms style that used those concepts. Try something that's more of a departure and try to make something unique than try and like slam that into a Worms game. It just didn't fit in a lot of cases.
Yeah, the only thing that there weren't really there just wasn't a lot of room for improvement in the formula. It's like you say, if you wanted to make another game in that style, you have to do something substantially different to make it interesting and not just like a bad clone of the game.
Yeah.
I think even today it's just so close to perfect that I'll play like a newer entry in the series and then like, no, I'm just gonna go play Armageddon again.
I agree.
Radical.
Yeah. Pinnacle Gaming. All right. So for my 14th S tier game here in number 2 position is XCOM: Enemy Unknown.
Nice.
That's the more recent XCOM,
but not the most recent.
Yes.
So the latest in the series is XCOM 2, and before that
possibly
came
the XCOM 2 expansion.
Actually, it's XCOM Chimera Squad. Is the latest one.
It's like a standalone expansion, isn't it?
It's a standalone game. It's very different. But
same game.
Go on.
I think. Anyway.
So we are in the turn-based strategy genre with XCOM, and XCOM is a story of the enormity of probabilities and how screwed you are by
95% shot, can't miss.
Yep. So the background story behind this is that if you've ever seen Men in Black, essentially you are the Men in Black organization, and the aliens are here to kill us. And so you are sent scrambling to respond to the very beginnings of this attack by the aliens, all the way through to organizing and mounting a defense. Now, all along the way, the aliens are rapidly advancing their plans to dominate Earth, and as their presence grows on the Earth and the storyline goes on, their technology gets more powerful. And so in order to ensure that humanity is not overwhelmed, you must invest in expanding your base. There's a base building aspect to this game. And what you're going to need to do is expand your base, research new items, and assemble squads of highly disposable people that you are going to send into combat. And so during the combat, your soldiers may be wounded or even killed. And hopefully you haven't modeled them after yourself or your very best friends, because you're going to feel real bad when they get pummeled to death by a giant brutish alien or shot in the face across the across the map.
Yeah, which is exactly why the game has extensive customization options.
So that you can...
Well, the XCOM 2 had the character pool mechanic, which was brilliant, where you could customize a bunch of people before you even start a game, and then they would show up in your army randomly. So
absolutely fantastic.
You know what's more fun than sending random soldiers to their death? Sending your friends and family to their death.
Yep. So the thing about XCOM is it is insanely hard, even on normal mode. The odds are truly against you in this game, even if they don't look to be, and you'll need to use a mixture of overall strategy in order to get your base built up and your fighting forces with a particular way of defending yourself against this alien invasion. But at the same time, you'll also need good tactics, because if all your soldiers are dead because of a bad round of combat, and the next emergency comes along, you may find yourself in incredible peril. Now, this franchise, I think they actually made a board game, an XCOM board game. I've not yet tried it.
Probably by this point.
Probably, yeah. It sounds familiar.
But so XCOM Enemy Unknown and its expansion Enemy Within, which includes cyborg enhancements and mutations and a whole bunch of other cool things, is humanity. It's interesting because the theme of that is, humanity in fighting back is now blurring the lines between the sciences that the aliens are doing to us versus what we're doing to ourselves in order to be able to repel this alien invasion. It's actually quite a bit of an older franchise. There's an older XCOM game that is its predecessor and is also along the same lines. But just, I think it came out in the late 90s? Or was it early 2000s?
I think it was early 90s. It was the original XCOM is very old.
Yeah, the original is quite old.
I think might have even been a DOS game.
I thought it was like Commodore 64 or something.
Yeah.
It's super old.
What makes it the worthy of this place is, well, part of it is how much time I've been able to invest in enjoying this game and getting murdered by aliens dozens of times to finally making it all the way to the final mission. It truly feels like you've conquered an insurmountable task. Now, along the way, some people resort to what they call save scumming, which is a attempt to prevent the permadeath of one of your beloved characters by basically rewinding the game. The game has a mode called Iron Man, where you can essentially block yourself from being able to do that if you want the extra challenge and you find yourself unable to resist turning back the hands of time. As you go along, the other cool thing is you really do feel invested in a lot of your characters that you're building up, and it is a little bit of a sim in that way.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this earlier. I think that when you have a game like XCOM where there's some time put into it and you kind of use the characters over the course of the campaign, and then they have permadeath, it really adds a lot of tension to the game, which I think it really makes the game kind of come into its own. Mm-hmm. I would say, when you're able to just restart the mission whenever you want and keep trying until you get the perfect kind of RNG shots that actually hit. That's fun, but I think with XCOM, it's a game where really you want to play.
You want to play by its rules.
Yeah.
Because its rules are pretty damn good. And yeah, like, getting invested in the characters that you've, like, built up. It's just like, there have been times in missions where, one of my characters is downed, but I've completed the objective and just got to get to the evac point. I could leave this guy to die and run to the evac point and make sure that, 5 of my 6 soldiers are healthy and ready for the next mission. But fuck, man.
Yeah,
that guy's one of us. We gotta go save him. And then maybe lose 2 more people in the process.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Or maybe you've just pulled off an amazing rescue mission. It could go both ways.
Yeah, like the game has these mechanics for like rescuing a downed soldier, and it's just that question: like, do you push your luck in trying to rescue him because you might lose more, or you might save that character that you've been leveling up and are invested in?
Yeah.
So.
And the aliens, in turn, they are pretty horrific in the abilities that they have and the threats that they pose.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there's an alien that resembles the aliens from the Aliens franchise, which will attempt to lay eggs in your soldiers, causing them to die catastrophically and spawn new aliens. That's one to definitely watch out for.
Yeah.
And then there's the tremendous hulking mutons, who are essentially... think Chewbacca, but more reptilian in nature, and they will definitely clobber you, if not blast you from afar with deadly plasma. I would say the most annoying and sinister of the enemies is the Thin Man, who in that version of the game spits toxins constantly, and so it can be quite harrowing where, normally games are already close and you have very little health to spare, and then all of a sudden your soldiers are walking around poisoned, and all of a sudden health management becomes an absolute crisis, and you can no longer even bunch your soldiers together to kind of perform the tactics that would require them to do that because of the risk of these guys poisoning you.
Yeah, exactly. Like in XCOM, you almost never have enough actions to do what you want to do in a turn. Where like, oh, I need to heal this guy. I need to take care of this guy that's on my flank, and I need to reload with this other guy. Like,
yeah. And then the other thing too
tough.
Is that even if you have exactly enough actions, you can be almost guaranteed that some of those, especially the shots, some of those will fail. Some of those shots that you need to make will fail.
Yeah.
And so you actually have to really make these kind of decisions of, do I commit 2 of my team members to take out this threatening alien, even though only one of them needs to hit to kill it? And so you have this question of like, do I spread my damage to try and get all of the kills that I can this turn to protect myself? But if I try to do that, I'm more likely to miss critical shots versus just focusing the fire on only one target. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of risk just constantly in the XCOM games, and really pushing your luck is it influences the strategy constantly.
Mm-hmm. And another thing to mention about replayability as well is there's different options that you can customize before you even start the game. So, for example, if you want your soldiers' performance to actually degrade the more injured they are, if you want that extra challenge, you can add things that make the game more challenging. Or if you want your if you want there to be longer term timers, or even things to be slightly easier, there's options that lean in that direction. And then there's just ones that change up the dynamics of the game and make it different and fun.
Like soldiers gaining completely random stats on level ups rather than like something that's more guided by the class they're in,
or even completely random perks. And that can actually be amazing because the perk. So you've got several classes of soldier, from your heavy rocket-bearing soldiers to your standard assault class to sniper, and I think the other one is it support?
In that game, it's support, heavy, sniper, assault.
And so, yeah, basically, normally when you're building each of these characters up, and as they become higher and higher level, you're going to be in a familiar tech tree. And the abilities synergize pretty well, not just between a character's own abilities, but that with his team. And you can actually go in and think about the design of what you want your team to do and be able to accomplish, and have some pretty action hero feeling combinations where you're able to take care of situations that seem normally deadly or impossible to survive and come out victorious. So that's another super cool thing about XCOM.
Yeah, and
yeah, the progression in the XCOM games can be pretty cool because I haven't played much of the first one, but like in XCOM 2, they have a ranger class that just gets... the ranger class just turns into a whirlwind of death.
In XCOM 2, they gave a soldier a sword. That's right. Aliens versus ninjas.
Yeah, well, and there's all these abilities that you can... Like, at first, it's one of the worst classes in the game. Because it's a close-range class, which is really, really dangerous. But then in the higher levels, you get these abilities to like do counterattacks and like jump between enemies and chain combos together.
Yeah,
and by the end of the
really
game,
cool shit.
End of the game, your characters feel like they're just like practically superheroes.
Yeah,
but the game is difficult.
It can still go wrong at any moment.
It still go. In fact, it goes disastrous. It can go disastrously wrong because you get overconfident. Because your characters are still very powerful, but they're still very fragile.
Yeah, and like again, you're not the only people that are progressing. As you go later on, the aliens start getting more powerful versions of their troops, and then suddenly it's just like, oh yeah, I've got this sniper and this purge, just picking off everybody that they can see, and then suddenly you see a berserker come out of the fog of war next to them, and suddenly they're dead. And you're fucked.
Yeah. Or, another thing that happened to me once was I had this ranger that was just the backbone of my team because the ranger was so strong because most of the experience was going to the ranger. So the ranger was a bit over-leveled and then got really, really good to the point where the ranger could basically solo the entire map. And I got really overconfident and... had some bad RNG rolls with a character that normally would be able to like mow through, a dozen enemies. Just got swarmed and died, and then now I had lost the character that was basically the only reason my team was able to actually beat the maps, and my whole campaign fell apart.
Yeah.
Because I had this. Yeah. I had this one over-leveled character I was relying on, and then the RNG did not smile upon me in one mission, and their death sunk the entire campaign.
Yeah. And one cool thing about XCOM, at least on PC, is there were a couple pretty sick mods for it. My favorite being Long War.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Long War was really good.
Yeah, because Long War basically doubled the amount of character classes there were.
And the content.
Yeah, I added a bunch more variations on the enemies and stuff. And in Long War for XCOM 2 even changed up almost the entire dynamic of how the missions worked in a really, really in-depth and fun way.
Yeah.
That was at times way too difficult, but even more so than if you thought the original game was difficult, Long War is hell. But
so fun.
Really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, I think it doubled the amount of soldier classes.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so with the expansion, I would definitely throw the expansion in here solidly as a recommendation, Enemy Within. So with that, it amped up the danger even further with a reward. So for the reward of collecting Meld, you had time-based loot boxes that would expire if you took too long to get them. And so there'd be the rush to go get these meld boxes, which were pretty great because this meld currency can be used to modify your troops. Mm-hmm. And you can either cybernetically enhance them and turn them into essentially a mixture between RoboCop and Terminator. Or you can give them genetic enhancements, things like skin that turns them invisible, eyes that can see through walls, really enhanced legs that can jump vast distances. So it definitely... So Enemy Within made the game feel a little bit easier, but also you had this crazy cabal of conspiracy theorists called Exalt, who would stop at nothing to harass your organization from within, and you weren't quite sure where they were coming from. But what was quite different is that, hey, these aren't aliens. These are actually your fellow humans who just so happen to be hell-bent on destroying your organization. Mm-hmm. And it added a whole new bend to the game.
Yeah, like I was talking about earlier with Fire Emblem, like something that I think makes a turn-based strategy game truly special in my mind is the addition of micro-objectives like the meld system in XCOM, where there is again a risk-reward to that, where you're exposing yourself more but for greater reward.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. That's XCOM, baby.
All right. So we're going to get into the number ones here.
Number one.
I know y'all have been waiting. So, I don't know about you, but sometimes you play a game and it's just like a certain chunk of time in your life is just that game. And for me, like this game, like it took up 6 months of my life. Just it was just this game. And yeah, it's just like my favorite game. And it might be the game that I put the most time into. My favorite game is FIFA 20. Because my name's in the credits.
God damn it.
No, my favorite game is actually Final Fantasy Tactics.
Okay.
You're scaring me there, man.
Wait, hold on a second.
You're scaring me.
Yeah, we'll go into my time at EA in another episode after I think on how many bridges I want to burn. But yeah, Final Fantasy Tactics, it's, for me, the most seminal game I've ever played. It molded my tastes more than anything. Final Fantasy Tactics is a turn-based strategy RPG for the PS1 that takes all the cool Final Fantasy standouts or standbys I've been in so many Final Fantasy games and puts it into this tactical RPG setting. And it's a really challenging game, and the mechanics of it, it's so mechanically dense with so many little things that make the game just feel like you could do almost anything. Like, there's a mechanic where if you have a large monster ally on your team, you can use them as a platform to get onto higher surfaces.
Yeah.
And it's that's never required. In fact, it's never told to the player, not even in the manual. You have to go and deep into the in-game extra tutorial shit if you want to find that out. That's deep in another menu. And it's so cool. And also, I initially bought the game because I thought it was an RTS. Because on the back it said 20 different types of units to command, and I thought that was 20 different types of units you can build.
Yeah.
Instead of the value, but it actually meant, because this game has the job system that has been in other Final Fantasy games, so you had a deep amount of customization that you could do towards it in your party for the roles you wanted to play. And it had this great system of, you had your main skill set on whatever class you're in, and then you could give it a sub-skill set from a different class, as well as a reaction move, a support move, and a movement ability. And
so is this 20 times 20 kind of options here then? or
in a way where it's just like you could have a thief that also could cast black magic, and its counter ability was it gains speed whenever it gets attacked, and its support ability would be it takes less magic damage, and its movement ability could be it can walk on water. you could have Jesus Black Mage Thief.
Jesus Black Mage Thief. Yeah,
the combinations are endless.
So yeah, we really getting a lot of different kind of class options there. Like combinatorial fucking.
Yeah,
explosion.
and so that also means that the replayability of this game is incredibly high as well. And how you earn the different abilities in the different jobs is also a system that is really cool, where every action that you perform successfully, like action, not just moving around, gives you job points. And the job points will level up the job you're in, which will give you access to new jobs. And also, you spend those job points to get whatever abilities you have. But the thing is, within each job's ability list, there are 0 prerequisites. So if you wanted to, you could grind out the most powerful shit by just spending all of your job points towards that. Just like, Cure 2, fuck that, I'm going straight for Holy. And then you find out, oh shit, I don't have enough MP to actually cast this spell.
Oh no.
And
it's got to level up more.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of game stories, this game has a really, really interesting plot. Like one of the best plots in any video game, to where it's this really like large scope political backstabbing plot between all these different factions, and then like the church, the religious church that is taking advantage of people through this belief in this old god who some people are trying to bring back through the use of these zodiac stones and shit. It's got a lot there, and a ton of themes as well between like commoner and noble folk, and so many different aspects to it. I did say, however, this game does have flaws, and the biggest one to me is that the difficulty curve is more like a difficulty seismograph. To where there are just like random difficulty spikes that are insane in certain spots.
Yeah, I recall. So I've played a little bit of Final Fantasy Tactics, and I think I gave up on it because it started out pretty normal and then just it hit some sort of weird wall.
Yeah,
the weird wall.
There's one section in particular where 3 of the hardest fights in the entire series are back to back. In one location they're back-to-back in one location after one fairly simple fight, to where if you beat the fairly simple fight, it asks you if you want to save your game. And if you do save your game and are perhaps only using one save slot, you are now locked into trying to beat those next 3 fights. And you can't go back into the world map and grind for levels or get different equipment and shit. So if you're like me, you might lose 15 hours of progress the first time you play that game because you don't know about rotating save slots.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and the music as well is like pretty much every Final Fantasy game is incredible. It's if you put on the opening theme to Final Fantasy Tactics right now, I will get goosebumps. That is guaranteed.
Oh yeah.
Such an important and special game for me that it is 100% deserving of the number 1 slot.
Nice.
Dope.
Nice. So my favorite game of all time. Funny thing is that you got Final Fantasy Tactics because you thought it was an RTS. I don't even know how I got this game. It literally just sort of showed up in a box one day. I think my mom found it at a yard sale or something, and it was in this like half-broken jewel case, like the CD for like the PC CD, half-broken case, and it just showed up, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I look at it and like, oh, that's a cool spaceship. And so my number 1 game of all time is Homeworld.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, in my opinion, the greatest single-player RTS campaign ever made. it's incredibly. It's just incredibly well done. The art in the game, I love it. The original held up pretty well for a long time. I think its graphics, because it had these like great. I think it was released in 1999, and so it's a space RTS with these beautiful sort of like nebula backgrounds and star backgrounds, and then you've got your 3D ship models. And they have since remastered and re-released the game with higher fidelity graphics, and I do probably recommend that if you're playing Homeworld today. Though they also changed the voiceover, and the original voiceover is way better. Yeah, I hate when they take something that actually, like the original VO was actually really well done, and I think it was part of the reason I liked the game, because like it had just like, I don't know, they did a good job with the story, and just the voice acting was very impactful, and especially like there's certain scenes in the game. To this day, my favorite piece of classical music is Adagio for Strings, because of the way they used it in that game. And it's a 3D RTS, so I don't think I actually mentioned that yet. But not a lot of games have tried to make a real-time strategy game actually function where the units can move in a full three-dimensional coordinate system. But Homeworld does, and it does a good job actually of doing that. It's about the only game series that even does it. There's been a few games in the series: Homeworld Cataclysm, Homeworld 2, Homeworld 2's like they're all good. Homeworld 2's really good too, but I liked the campaign in the first one better. And it's got some multiplayer too, which is it's pretty good. It's pretty interesting, but it's a bit weird because I never found that the multiplayer was as engaging as the single player campaign for me. It's got a really cool campaign too, because the campaign, as opposed to a lot of other RTS games where you kind of like build your base every round and build new units every round. So there's not really base building per se in Homeworld, but you have a mothership. If you ever lose the mothership, you're dead. In multiplayer, the mothership, your goal is to actually destroy the enemy mothership and protect your own. In the single player campaign, if your mothership blows up, that's it. Mm-hmm. Like you lose. And you can upgrade the mothership with like researching, new upgrades to unlock new ships and new upgrades for ships and things like that. And then the units that you get actually just stay with you throughout the missions. So every ship that you build, in theory, can stay with you for the rest of the campaign. And in fact, you better do that, because did I mention that this game is hard as balls? And you have to really go out of your way to make sure you don't lose ships, because there's a fixed amount of resources in the campaign, and you actually need to be really careful about managing your ships. You can repair them and stuff like that too with some repair ships, and you can also steal enemy ships, which is very critical. I think it's actually critical because you can steal enemy ships in the campaign, and then now they stay with you through the missions. And that's one of the few ways to actually get an edge in the campaign, because you're always going to lose a few ships. And so I actually really struggled when I was younger, even beating the game, because you don't realize, like, you might get to, like, say mission 7 or 8, which is like a really there's one mission in particular I was stuck on for a long time, and it's and the reason was because I did not have the right ships, or I did not have enough of the right ships, because I had lost too many of too many ships earlier in the campaign. And you can't do that because then you're just unable to actually beat it because you just do not have enough firepower. And so what I ended up having to do was go back and get a lot better at playing the first few missions so that I could actually bring most of my fleet through the campaign without losing too many ships, because you just get to a point where you hit a wall where you can't beat a mission because you just don't have enough firepower.
That's super interesting.
So it's so the campaign's interesting because it's a bit more focused. Yeah, it's a bit more persistent than most other RTS campaigns are, and then that really ties together well in with the story and sort of the lore of the game as well. Which I don't want to spoil too much, but you're kind of like the last of you're kind of like the last of the sort of a dying planet sort of thing, right? And there's even this one mission like early on. It's maybe like the third-ish mission where you're basically like saving like as many people as you can, and that's kind of it. That's everybody.
Yeah. See, you know what game's good? When it's 22 years old and you still don't want to spoil it.
I mean, yeah. The first few missions, honestly, the story in Homeworld and just like there's not a lot of games that I would say like the story just blew me away and felt very emotionally impactful. Homeworld is one of the few games I'll say that about. It's one of the few game stories where I'm like, this story is really good. I love it. I'm super invested in the story and in like seeing these people succeed, right? That doesn't happen for me that much with games. So it's very dear to my heart. Homeworld. I love it. And also if you actually manage to beat the game, you get an incredible credit song by Yes.
What? Holy shit. That is one of the few things that you could have said to make me be like, I need to play this game. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Yes.
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 It's funny. I swear I've told you that before.
The last time you talked to me about Homeworld was quite a while ago, so it's possible that you did tell me that before and I forgot.
It's totally possible. Yeah. But yeah, if you
that also might have been before. You also might have told me that before, like, Yes got brought back into the public consciousness by JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
That's fair.
And Roundabout.
Oh, probably would have been before that. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely, if you like RTS games, you owe it to yourself to at least play Homeworld, because as a 3D space RTS, there's really
nothing else like it.
Yeah, there really isn't anything else like it, like the Homeworld games. I think there's maybe one other game I've seen that tried to be a 3D RTS, but from what I heard, it was not as good as Homeworld. Because it is a bit awkward to try and make a control scheme work for moving a bunch of units in 3 dimensions, but they do make it work.
There is an RTS called Acron, I believe, that's also a 3D RTS, but it's actually a 2D plus time as the third dimension.
Oh!
And that game was too complicated for me to wrap my head around.
I heard about that game. I wanted to try it, but I never did.
Acron?
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounded interesting.
Like, you had a timeline, and you could, like, go back in time, send units back in time and forward in time, and they'd appear there as the time wave, like, got to certain events. It was I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Oh god, you know, I'm looking at some screenshots, and I think I actually might have played this.
It's like 4D chess.
I think I did try this, and like it was just really unfortunate because it was just too weird.
Yeah.
I remember this now. I remember this this user interface. It was really hard to play.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just didn't. I don't know. I feel like there's this game I've seen on Steam, 5D multiplayer chess with time travel. I'm really tempted. I've heard that like it actually is well executed, as much as like a concept like that can be well executed, like because it's just inherently difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, Acron was a very cool concept. But yeah, I couldn't get into it. I also felt like even apart from the difficulty of like figuring out the time travel in the game, that the actual RTS mechanics of the game itself weren't very good.
Right.
That's what I remember. So.
Okay.
This is I'm reading a little bit about Acron, and it actually sounds pretty fascinating, and also mind-boggling.
Yeah. Homeworld. That's
Homeworld.
cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the number one on my S tier list?
the
most S tier of S tier.
The most S of S tier.
It's like in Devil May Cry, like S wasn't enough, they had to go to triple S
Yep.
for their rankings. This is the triple S game.
Halo
Sounds
3.
like the Halo theme, yep.
Halo
my
3.
number one game.
Right.
Oh my goodness. That game has my heart and soul. The amount of fun that we had in every aspect of this game, like in terms of the memories that were made, how high quality the game was, the way that it sharpened my skills, the really funny things that would just happen during a game that we would endlessly laugh over, the custom game modes that we built. Swoctagon, that was one of my favorites.
Swoctagon.
And so I don't even know where to begin, but let me just say, Halo 3, if you're a Halo fan, then you'll already have been playing Halo 1 and 2, and just, the story has now come to this in Halo 3, and everything just feels so refined when you start playing it, and you feel these differences of how, the game is from the first and the second Halos, and so you, where do I begin? Like,
Well, maybe let's start with talking about the campaign. Which
yes,
I think that Halo is one of the best co-op series that has ever been
by far,
and Halo 3's campaign in particular does stand out to me as being excellent.
For sure. Halo 3's...
Halo... What's interesting about the campaign to me with Halo is that they actually made a campaign that you can play solo or or co-op, and it works well either way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's rare to have the same maps in a campaign that you can do alone or with friends, and it feels balanced and well designed and fair either way. I not a lot of other games I can think of like that.
Yeah.
And
a lot of really sick moments in that campaign too.
Yeah,
man, the ending sequence when you're driving the Warthog, that shit was. Oh. They did a similar ending sequence in the first game, but I think in the third game with just all the platforms just disintegrating and falling behind you, it's just one of the most cinematic things I've ever done in a shooter for sure.
By far.
Yeah, I think it just ties back into kind of what Sean was saying, where everything in Halo 3 felt very refined by that point. Bungie had pretty much gotten the formula down, and it was executed very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And everyone loves a good vehicle segment at the end.
And then there was the multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether you were playing with, your friends directly on the same console or even just online, the games with your friends, there were so many different customizations that you could make before you even got into the ultimate of customizations, which is Forge mode. So we'll just talk about regular multiplayer, or rather, we'll start with, So there's multiplayer with your friends. and you can save the settings of your favorite modes and have those on hand to if you guys enjoy something like having only shotguns and sniper rifles, you can do that. There was game modes that totally put a twist on the first-person shooter thing, like Infection, where almost like a twisted game of tag. You'll have your opposing team made of quote-unquote zombies whose number is ever-growing towards the end of the game. To things like Capture the Flag or King of the Hill. Big open brawls with vehicles running all over the map.
Oddball.
Yes.
Yeah, Halo's got some of the biggest breadth of game modes that are actually fun to play of any shooter as well. Like a lot of shooters have a lot of different game modes that just some of them just fall flat and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of shooters where there's like really only a few game modes. Like
yeah, where it's just like you play either free for all or team deathmatch in a lot of shooters.
Yeah, or like a game like Battlefield where you play for the conquest or like Rush or Titan or whatever, because those are the modes that Battlefield's good at. You don't play Battlefield for team deathmatch or God forbid free for all deathmatch in Battlefield. What a stupid. Like, it's just not the game that excels at that.
Yeah.
But Halo, works well in team modes, works well in vehicle modes, works well in free-for-all modes. Like, it really does hit a wide variety of game modes effectively.
And then there was the online matchmaking, and the matchmaking was quite fun. Like, I really amped up my first-person shooter skills at the time by engaging in that matchmaking. And with a few of my friends, we learned how to play good together, and then just on my own, the skill tree, there was so much diverse ways to become better at the game. You could understand the levels better and their particular quirks. You could, pick your fighting style and basically every time that you're about to or are currently running into an enemy would be a microcosm of both strategy and tactics overall. And the difference would be between, dying, having a low kill death ratio to, killing the majority of the opponents that you see to mowing down everybody in a lobby and they have no choice but to bow to the green metallic god that is pounding their shit in constantly. So that's matchmaking. Although I gotta say is that there's players who will enjoy and become very good at matchmaking with any first-person shooter game, and then there's players who don't find that enjoyable or perhaps don't have the requisite mindset required to really dive in. For me, I was never a master of those games, but I dove in as far as my skill set would allow me before I started getting diminishing returns. But the thing that kind of put the cherry on the top is truly Forge mode. And with Forge mode, it really spawned... I don't think there was many games like that before that actually... Because I think that's where Red vs. Blue popped out of, was Halo 3's Forge.
No, Red vs. Blue was before that.
Red vs. Blue came from... I think they were they using Halo CE or just Halo on the Xbox to do it? I can't remember, but it was the first Halo.
Yeah. So with Forge mode, they
might have been using the PC version. I know they switched at one point to using the PC version because they could get some extra effects in.
Yeah. But with Forge mode, you could not only design the rules of this level, to your heart's content, but you could actually modify the level itself and create custom scenarios or even entire game modes.
Yeah. Because, level creation, there have been games, as far back, there were games on the Commodore 64, or, Lode Runner, that had level creation stuff in it, and even, Excitebike for the NES did. But at a certain point, level creation kind of became a thing of the past. Especially in these, Halo 3 was the first one to really bring it back into this AAA, super high-budget, glossy title in a way that, it was engaging. Like I spent a fair amount of time in Forge mode myself, just trying to make like kind of cool levels to play with. And this wasn't something like Little Big Planet where the creation tools are way more robust, but way more difficult to learn. Like Forge mode was you could very easily create stuff with Forge mode. They did a really good job with it.
Definitely. I remember playing one in particular. So in Forge mode, when you're actually editing things, you shrink down into this tiny metallic avatar, which can actually be shot at, destroyed, and otherwise killed. And we had entertaining games where one person would be the Forge Master on each team, and the others would be the ones trying to protect the Forge Master from being eliminated. And the Forge Master would be chucking weapons down, throwing down vehicles, changing the terrain, adding cover, removing cover, deleting cover, and it really was quite the entertaining.
Yeah. It's like exploding barrel here.
Yep. So, yeah, by far one of the greatest games of all time for me, and if not one of the most fun games that I've ever played.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think, Halo is incredibly popular as a series, and I think what it's always done right is that it's really just solidified, pretty much across the board, what a console shooter can be. I personally prefer PC mouse keyboard for shooters, but Halo is a series that has always been console first, and Bungie really pushed the envelope of what you can do with shooters on a console. And even at the time, I remember Halo specifically. Halo was doing things that hadn't been done in shooters on consoles before. And they've always been trying to push that, and it's a very much solid. Just Halo is just so solid across the board. It does there's nothing to me individually where Halo's the first to do or the best to do necessarily, but it does everything really well. There's nothing it does really poorly, That's what I would say. There's a certain minimum standard in everything in Halo that just makes it very just a robust game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's
our
the list.
15.
Wow. All right, and before we go here, I just kind of want to if anybody's got some honorable mentions they would just want to shout out just for a little endorphin hit. Age of Mythology and Dawn of War are two RTS games that I love that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, I love Dawn of War.
Yeah.
The first Dawn of War...
Specifically.
Specifically.
Dawn of War 1 and its expansions, I'm going to say.
Which was a more classic, kind of straight RTS, as opposed... Dawn of War 2 was weird and did more tactical thing. 3, I think, kind of built on that, and it wasn't really as good.
Yeah. Gunbound. Love me some Gunbound.
Oh, yeah. Gunbound. Yeah. Good God. It's like multiplayer online Worms a little bit, yeah. Totally would be a big-time gotcha game these days.
It was a big-time gotcha game. That
it was.
I don't think we necessarily have to talk about them talk about our honorable mentions too much. We're getting kind of long in the two.
Actually, an honorable mention I do want to mention here is a Pokemon Gold.
Yeah,
we did not mention a single Pokemon game in the top, but I love the Pokemon series, and it was very much influential.
Same.
For me.
It's definitely that's a number 16 game for me, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing with Civilization. We didn't mention that, but again,
I think we'll get into a log Civilization talk in a future episode.
Classic, yeah, just a great turn-based strategy series with a mass epic scope.
Mm-hmm.
Time Splitters 2.
Oh yeah, that's nice, and GoldenEye as well. GoldenEye is an absolute classic.
Just some real classic console shooters.
Nightfire, yeah. Agent Under Fire as well. Weirdly, there have been some pretty good Bond games. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm just gonna throw Portal in there because I love Portal. Portal's a great game.
Portal
throw
is a
Portal
great
through
game.
there.
What?
You'll end up on the other side of the tier list.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We mentioned Mario Kart 64, but also Mario Kart DS and Mario Kart Wii are also incredible entries into the franchise.
And Mario Party 2.
Oh dear God.
Yeah.
And and Audio Surf. That's a great game.
I love Audio Surf. Audio Surf is wonderful.
What was the
I've probably, we probably spent hundreds of hours playing Audio Surf.
Oh yeah, I listened to a few podcasts in Audio Surf a couple times.
What?
All right. We're releasing this on Audio Surf next week.
Yeah, you download the raw MP3 and throw that bitch in there.
Yeah, check out the high scoreboard on Audio Surf.
Brilliant.
All right, so I think that probably wraps it up. Just want to say thank you to all listeners who have stuck through the many hours of this favorite games mini-series.
Yeah, we thought that this list of 15 games each was going to go a lot faster than it did.
Yeah, maybe for me a little bit faster, but as the games got better, we just need to talk about them more.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is something I've been wanting to do for a while. Just like talk about this top 15. So it feels very cathartic to get it all out there.
The list of a lifetime.
Lay it all out on the table.
Yeah. So thanks for being with us, and we are going to definitely be bringing you lots more gaming content in the future. So make sure to like, subscribe, and tune in next time into the Angry Sun Zone.
We've got a Twitch channel now, Angry Sun Zone. We've got a YouTube channel, also Angry Sun Zone. Made a Twitter account. You guessed it, Angry Sun Zone, at Angry Sun Zone. And as always, we got our email address, angrysunzone@outlook.com. So, I'd love to hear listeners' favorite games. So if you want to send those our way, maybe we'll talk about your favorite games in the future episodes.
Yeah. If there's any games that you love, please tell us, and don't just tell us what they are, but tell us why you love them. We love to hear.
Interesting to hear.
We love to hear the backstory, right?
Yeah, this was a real treat for me to hear your guys' opinions on your favorite games. So I want more. I want more opinions coming in.
Yeah, just an opinion cannon aimed at our faces.
Yeah.
Gotta gobble it down. It's opinions giving.
And with that, Angry Sun Zone signing off.
The Angry Sun Zone is setting to rise, I don't know, next week or something. We'll see.
Till the next time you get a rise out of us.